a bottle of wine, stripped of its label, yet hiding a secret darker than the glass itself. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Your voices keep these mysteries alive. Let's uncover it. I just settled into my chair in the office with the day's mail, which on that particular Thursday was as unexciting as cold oatmeal. Bills, a circular from a wine merchant, and a card from a lawyer I didn't like. Wolfe sat behind his desk, monumental, his eyes half closed as if the act of breathing was already a labor worth conserving. He had before him a book about Roman viticulture that looked heavy enough to break the table if dropped. Fritz popped his head in with the precision of a man who has lived too long in a house where interruptions are weighed like diamonds. "Mr. Goodwin, there is a gentleman here," he announced, "who insists the matter is urgent." Wolfe sighed, which in his language was equivalent to another man pounding the table. He waved a thick finger without lifting his gaze. That meant I was to deal with it. The visitor turned out to be tall, nervous, and dressed in a suit that had been fashionable when Coolidge was president. He clutched a narrow wooden box, the kind you might expect to see a violin in if the violin were a little drunk and decided to lie down sideways. He introduced himself as Henry Ward, of Ward and Lawson Importers, and announced, with the breathless fervor of a man selling insurance, that he had something Mr. Wolfe must see. I considered telling him that Mr. Wolfe must also see the bottom of his beer glass by lunchtime, but I let him in. Wolfe flicked his eyes at the man, then at the box, and then, in a rare display of actual interest, set aside his book. Ward laid the box carefully on Wolfe's desk and opened it with the solemnity of a priest unveiling a relic. Inside, cushioned in straw, was a wine bottle. It had no label, no markings, just dark green glass, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. "This," Ward said, his voice quavering, "arrived at our warehouse yesterday morning. No invoice, no origin, nothing. It was simply there." I glanced at Wolfe. He hadn't moved, but I knew the look. That was the same expression he reserved for orchids that bloomed in ways orchids weren't supposed to. Ward continued. "This morning, my partner, Mr. Lawson, insisted it was a harmless prank and ordered it opened. He uncorked it, poured himself a taste, and within the hour, he was dead." That got Wolfe's attention. His lips compressed, his brows dipped a fraction. That was as close as he came to leaping to his feet in horror. "You are suggesting," Wolfe said finally, his voice like a cellar door creaking open, "that your partner was poisoned." Ward's Adam's apple bobbed. "The police think so, but they're treating it as suicide. He had heart problems, you see." "I don't believe that." "Mr. Wolfe, this bottle is a message. To me, to my company. Someone is playing a game, and it has already cost a life." Wolfe sat back, closed his eyes, and for a moment looked as if he might dismiss the man entirely. Then he muttered, "Pfui," which, translated, meant the wheels were already turning. He opened his eyes again, fixed them on Ward, and said, "Leave the bottle. Mr. Goodwin will see you out." Ward blinked. "But will you take the case?" Wolfe's tone was final, brooking no argument. "I already have." Fritz took Ward to the door while I made myself useful by standing over the unlabeled bottle like a night watchman guarding a lump of coal. Wolfe told me to set it on the red leather blotter, which I did delicately, resisting the primal urge to hold it at arm's length. It wasn't hissing, and the wax didn't pulse, so I decided not to be dramatic. Wolfe leaned back, laced his fingers over the acreage, and gave it a look that you could hang meat on. I knew the signs. He was 3 moves into a chess game he hadn't told me we were playing. "Call Dr. Vollmer," he said, eyes still on the glass. "Ask if he can spare us 10 minutes to inspect an empty wine bottle that may have contained poison." "You'll want it empty?" I asked. His lids came down and up, which passes for exasperation with him. "We will not open it, Archie. The police will. Volmer will advise on what to say to them and what not to. We must not contaminate the evidence, nor permit it to be misconstrued. I dialed. Volmer's nurse promised to ring him off his rounds and call back. I hung up and reported. Wolfe grunted approval. And Mr. Ward? Gone. He left a card and a tremor. He said he can bring the warehouse records and shipment logs after lunch if we like. We do not like. We require. Wolfe tugged the bell cord for Fritz, then ignored it to eye the bottle again. There is a message indeed, he murmured. But it is not for Mr. Ward alone. Care to share with the class? He closed his eyes. The message for me was standard. Be quiet and earn my salary. I was ready to earn it in a less quiet way when Fritz came in, smooth as a soft shoe. Yes, sir? Fritz, the office will be invaded, Wolfe told him as if announcing a weather front. Please be prepared to serve beer for Mr. Goodwin, coffee for the police if they insist on being abstemious, and nothing stronger unless requested. Preserve luncheon. We will dine at the regular hour. Fritz accepted the prophecy with a nod. Very good, sir. I will set a tray aside. He slid out, and we slid into silence, broken by the telephone. This time it was Volmer himself who listened while I gave him the outline. He said to keep the bottle sealed, not to sniff it, and, if I could help it, not to let anyone else sniff it either. He added the gentle reminder that poison cases are high blood pressure machines for Kramer, and if we intended to keep ours at a healthy level, we should phone the inspector before the inspector's nose told him. I relayed the wisdom. Wolfe frowned, which means he agreed. Do so, he said. Be crisp, but not provocative. I'm as crisp as a romaine, I told him, and called homicide. I asked for Inspector Kramer and got him, and from the first syllable I knew his cigar was lit and his day was not improved by me. I gave him the essentials. A bottle at our house, delivered to Warden Lawson without pedigree. Lawson dead an hour after sampling, the client thinking poison and messages, us thinking police. Kramer's growl came through the wire like he had installed special equipment. You're not thinking police. You're thinking you can sit on a prop until it suits you to hand it over. Don't. Stebbins and I are on our way. If you've breathed on it, I'll arrest Wolfe for inhaling. We've done no respiratory experiments, I said. Door will be open. I hung up. They're coming, I announced. Of course, Wolfe said. He reached for the book he had abandoned and didn't open it. Archie, when Mr. Ward returns, I want the precise details of the bottle's arrival, who found it, who touched it, where it has been stored, who had access to the warehouse and to Mr. Lawson's office. And we need the names, employees, rival importers, the firm's accountant, and any client who might benefit from Mr. Lawson's demise. But first, we will endure Inspector Kramer. Endure, I repeated, and strolled the carpet like a man warming up for a short sprint. I checked the window latch, not because I expected a sharpshooter on 35th Street, but because in this house you develop habits. The orchids would be hearing the murmur from the office and wondering what kind of human horticulture was afoot. The bell didn't ring so much as bang. I answered. Pearlie Stebbins's shoulders came through first, then his jaw, then the rest of the civic architecture. Kramer followed with enough cigar to qualify as a third party. We did the pas de deux. I ushered, they glowered. In the office, Kramer planted himself near the globe stand. Stebbins hovered by the door, and Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. He offered no hand, only a dignified nod toward the bottle on his desk, as if presenting a visiting dignitary who had made the mistake of coming without a passport. Kramer looked at it the way a bull looks at a red flag someone has thoughtfully nailed to his hoof. Where'd you get it, Wolfe? Wolfe tipped his head at me. So I told the story and did it straight. No embroidery. Lawson had uncorked. Lawson had sipped. Lawson had died. Ward had come shaking with a bottle that had no label, and we had not broken the seal. I added that doctor. Vollmer had advised we call them and keep the thing pristine, which we had. Ward and Lawson, Kramer said, chewing smoke. We've got a man there. Preliminary says Lawson collapsed at his desk. Cup and bottle present. Sample sent to the lab. He leaned forward. Why bring a second bottle here? It is the same bottle, Wolfe said. The one from Ward's warehouse. Mr. Goodwin did not say second. He pinched a brow. Your man is mistaken, Inspector. Kramer barked a laugh without humor. My man described a bottle with wax and no label. He jabbed the cigar in the direction of our guest. That. So unless Lawson sipped from thin air, we're talking duplicates. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Archie. I gave it as Ward gave it to us, I said. Ward said this bottle was opened by Lawson and afterward brought to us. He did not claim an exact chain of custody. He said it arrived yesterday, Lawson opened it this morning, and an hour later, Lawson was dead. If your man is cradling one at the warehouse, then either Ward or your man is telling it wrong, or our bottle is a twin. I vote for human error. Kramer's lips pulled back. I don't. Stebbins. Pearlie moved in and, with all the tenderness of a gorilla handling an egg, set a cardboard evidence container on Wolfe's desk. He opened it, took out a clear plastic cylinder, and placed it near our bottle. Inside the cylinder sat a cork, stained a deep garnet. Found under Lawson's desk, Stebbins said. Our bottle, if it is ours, was open before your Boy Scout Club got it. I didn't love the implication. I don't deny the possibility, I said, but we didn't pop anything. Ask the wax. Kramer gave me a look that suggested he was tired of my voice, but would accept a few more syllables if they were useful. He edged closer, squinted at the wax seal, and grunted. Yeah, untampered. So how the hell— Inspector, Wolfe cut in, and the room pivoted to him automatically. If there are 2 bottles, that is the point. Someone wanted Mr. Lawson to drink, and someone wanted Mr. Ward to fear. 1 bottle to kill and 1 to threaten. Ward, being prudent or panicked, chose to bring the token to me. I suppose he intended to buy protection. He will instead receive truth, which is rarer and less comfortable. Kramer's nostrils flared around the cigar. You suppose a lot sitting on that chair? I sit because it is efficient, Wolfe replied. You are welcome to pace. Mr. Goodwin does enough for both of us. We did the ritual of claiming and counterclaiming. Kramer wanted the bottle. Wolfe wanted a receipt and a clear acknowledgement that it had reached the inspector's hands, sealed. Kramer, for once, didn't bark at the paperwork, maybe because he liked the smell of his own temper better than the smell of a complaint later. Stebbins sealed our visitor into an evidence bag, tagged it, and set it carefully in his case. The room felt different when the glass left the desk, as if someone had removed the centerpiece at a dinner no one was sure they wanted to attend. Ward's version of the morning, Kramer said, tucking the case handle into his mitt, will be obtained at the precinct. If you're smart, you'll keep your pudgy fingers out until we're done. Inspector, Wolfe said, polite and acid. I will apply my pudgy fingers to the telephone. Mr. Goodwin will apply his feet to the pavement. If you wish to keep him out, you must handcuff him, and your handcuffs will break. Kramer let a line of smoke curl. I've got spares. Don't test me. He glanced at me. If Ward shows, call me. If he doesn't, call me. If you even think the word Ward, call me. I'll think Kramer instead, I said, and escorted them out with my best doorman smile. On the stoop, Kramer paused. Goodwin, tell Wolfe something for me. He doesn't always accept telegrams. Tell him this. The lab report won't be quick, but when it lands, if it says poison, nobody is going to enjoy my mood. He squinted. And if it says not poison, nobody's going to enjoy my mood. He turned, bowled down the steps, and was gone. I closed the door and returned to the office to find Wolfe massaging the bridge of his nose like a man who had just been forced to listen to modern music. "Pfui," he said softly, which covered a lot of ground. "2 bottles," I said. "Possibly," he allowed, "or a deception of perception. Mr. Ward may have conflated sequences, or Kramer's man may have misconstrued what he saw, but duplicates are more interesting. If there are 2, there were 2 intents. So, 1 to kill, 1 to scare, or 1 to kill twice if necessary. Or 1 to kill, 1 to furnish a trail to me," Wolfe said, and opened his eyes. "You will call Mr. Ward and require him to come at 2 o'clock with the records. You will ask him who, besides himself and Mr. Lawson, saw the bottle. You will ask for the names of their principal competitors and any recent disputes. And you will take notes, Archie. Clean notes. I want to see the pattern without your adjectives unduly embellishing it." I dialed. Ward answered at once, as if he were holding the receiver and praying to it. He agreed to 2 o'clock, promised files, and tried to apologize for being rattled. I told him rattled was fine as long as it didn't extend to facts. After I hung up, I filled Wolfe in, and he accepted with a grunt that said the world had, for the moment, arranged itself in a tolerable line. "Before lunch," he said, "you will visit Ward and Lawson. Speak to whoever is present and sensible. Do not bandy theory. Observe. Particularly the warehouse entry points and any sign of surveillance. Cameras, sign-in books, men who watch but don't speak. Give your card to no one except the senior clerk and the foreman. If Mr. Lawson's office is sealed, do not pester the police. Merely look." Merely? That's like telling a cat to merely regard a fish. I got my hat and checked my notebook. "What about Saul?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. "Not until we invite him. For now, Mr. Goodwin will suffice." Fritz appeared at the threshold to inquire whether luncheon should be advanced in view of civic tumult. Wolfe informed him that civilization must hold. We would eat at 1. Until then, I was to stir the pot and see what floated. I went out, and the air on 35th had the heavy feel that comes when something rotten is unwrapped a block away, and the smell is still deciding whose window to climb into. On the way to the garage, I passed a delivery truck with a painted grapevine on the side and wondered if coincidence had gotten a driver's license. If there were 2 bottles, someone had gone to trouble. And when people go to trouble, they expect returns. I intended to find out who was trying to cash a check on Ward and Lawson's account and whether the signature was forged. At the curb, I paused and looked back at the brownstone. Wolfe's silhouette would be unchanged, a mountain contemplating a pebble that had rolled into his garden and asked to be named. The bottle was gone, but the intrusion wasn't. We had opened the door, and the case had walked in and taken a seat. I told the sedan to be charming, slid in, and pointed it downtown. The day had all the makings of a parade with rain forecast, and I was the guy who forgot the umbrella. But if Wolfe's appetite had been engaged, and it had, label or no label, then we were marching toward a dining room where somebody else's secrets would be the main course. And, for what it's worth, I have always had a healthy appetite. When I reached the Ward and Lawson warehouse, it was one of those Manhattan structures that had given up on pretending to be anything but brick, dust, and sweat. The sign over the loading bay had seen better days, and a pair of trucks idled out front like horses, wondering if their riders would ever come back. Inside, the place smelled like wood, cork, and ambition gone slightly stale. I introduced myself at the desk to a clerk, with hair so oily you could have fried potatoes on it, and he directed me toward the foreman. The foreman was a stocky fellow named Dugan who looked as if his arms had been forged for the sole purpose of carrying crates. He didn't like me, didn't trust me, and said so with his eyes before he opened his mouth. "Police already came through," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that left them looking worse. "Asked all the questions worth asking." "Lucky for you, I'm not police," I told him. "I'm here on behalf of Henry Ward. He's nervous, and nervous men ask other men to check under the bed for them. So I'm checking. he grunted. Ward's been nervous since the Prohibition days. You'd be nervous too if half your shipments back then could have landed you in jail. Did any of them land him in the morgue? I asked. That earned me a suspicious squint. Lawson's the one in the ground. Ward's still breathing. I decided Dugan wasn't going to cough up anything useful if I pressed. So I walked the warehouse. The place was organized enough. Rows of stacked crates, some stamped with French chateaux, others with Italian vineyards. The bottle count was what you'd expect from a firm of their size. What I didn't expect were the gaps. Here and there a space in the row looked too neat, too deliberate. I bent down at one such spot. The dust told its own story. A crate had been there until recently, then moved, and not by the kind of men who forgot to clean up after themselves. The space wasn't large, just wide enough for a case of a dozen bottles. I jotted it down. Lawson's office was upstairs, sealed with a strip of police tape. I didn't tug, but I leaned close enough to see through the glass window in the door. Papers scattered, a chair tipped slightly, and an empty tumbler on the desk. Nothing screamed murder, but nothing looked like normal bookkeeping either. On the way down, I encountered a young man balancing an armload of invoices. He was tall, thin, and the sort who gave off the impression of knowing too much about numbers and not enough about people. His tie was crooked, his shoes dusty. I asked his name. Peter Nye, he said. Accounting. His voice cracked on the last syllable. Mr. Nye, I'm Archie Goodwin, working with Nero Wolfe. Your boss Ward is paying us the dubious honor of untangling this knot. Care to tell me what you think happened? He shifted the papers nervously. I don't know. Mr. Lawson wasn't exactly cautious. He liked to test the goods, make sure they were authentic. He said his palate could detect fraud faster than any lab. I suppose he proved himself wrong. That's one way of putting it. Did you see the bottle before he opened it? Yes. It arrived yesterday morning. I signed the intake myself. No invoice, no bill of lading, no origin mark. Just a crate with straw and that one bottle. He swallowed. I told him it looked strange. He laughed. Who else saw it? Ward, of course. Dugan, maybe. One or two of the warehouse boys. Lawson told me to file it under special consignment. Nye shifted his weight. Then this morning he said he'd try it. I thought it was, well, foolish. Then he was dead. He stared at his shoes like they might offer absolution. I let the silence work for a bit, then asked, You know of anyone who'd want Lawson dead? That got me a glance sharp enough to cut paper. Plenty. He was ruthless. Suppliers, competitors, even clients. He drove hard bargains. Too hard sometimes. He cut corners. And he and Ward, well, they didn't agree on much anymore. On what, for instance? Expansion. Lawson wanted to push into new markets, riskier ones. Ward wanted to stay steady. That caused tension. He clutched his stack of papers tighter. If you'll excuse me, I need to file these. I let him go. His answers had been useful, but the way he trembled told me he was holding something back. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Back on the floor, I lingered near the loading bay. One of the warehouse boys, no older than 20, was stacking crates. I asked him casually if he remembered the mystery bottle. He nodded. Yeah, Lawson himself carried it upstairs, said it was a prize. Ward didn't look so sure. That matched Nye's version, and Dugan's silence told me more than words could. Everyone had seen the thing, but no one wanted to admit touching it. A poisoned chalice, in more ways than one. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the clock was easing toward 1. Fritz had lunch ready, as always, and Wolfe greeted me with a grunt that passed for hunger. We ate cold salmon with dill, potatoes au gratin, and the kind of bread that makes you forget about dessert. Wolfe ate in silence, but his eyes told me he was storing my report even before I gave it. After lunch, I laid it out. The gaps in the warehouse rows, Lawson's reckless tasting, Nye's quivering testimony, and the suggestion that Ward and Lawson had been at odds. Wolfe listened, grunted once, and said, "Good. Now when Ward arrives, we will hear the same tale in his voice. Discrepancies will be instructive." At 2 sharp, the bell rang. I showed Ward in. He looked more wrung out than before, as if the bottle had been haunting him even after he left it. He carried a sheaf of records under his arm. Wolfe gestured him to the red chair and waited while he fumbled with the papers. Ward laid them out. Shipping logs, intake records, account statements. They told a story of steady business with the occasional irregularity. Wolfe leafed through slowly, his lips pursed. "Mr. Ward," he said finally, "how many people besides you and Mr. Lawson handled the mystery bottle?" Ward hesitated. "Handled? Well, Lawson did. Nye, perhaps. I myself touched the crate, but not the bottle. Dugan may have. I'm not certain." "You are certain of nothing. How did it arrive?" "As I told you, yesterday morning. It was waiting in the intake bay when the men opened. No record of delivery, no witness. Just there." "Archie," Wolfe said without looking at me. "Note that down." Ward's eyes darted. Do you think it was meant for me? That Lawson's death was accidental?" Wolfe's voice was flat. "Possibly, or possibly not. That is the question." Ward licked his lips. "Then you must protect me. Whoever did this, if they think I will interfere, they might—" "Mr. Ward," Wolfe cut in, "I do not provide protection. I provide clarity. If you require bodyguards, you must engage other services." Ward wilted. "Clarity, then. Please." When he left, Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, fingers steepled. "2 things," he said. 1. Lawson was careless, and his death may indeed have been the price of his carelessness. But I doubt it. 2. If there were 2 bottles, then one remains unaccounted for. That disturbs me. I asked if we should bring in Saul Panzer. Wolfe shook his head. "Not yet. The field is too crowded already. You will revisit Ward and Lawson tomorrow. Speak again with Nye. More firmly. He is concealing something. If there is another bottle, he may know." I reminded him that Kramer wouldn't be thrilled about us nosing around. Wolfe sniffed. "Inspector Kramer is never thrilled, but he has his bottle. He will busy himself with his lab reports. That affords us a brief window." I took it as a dismissal. Back in my room, I reviewed my notes. 2 bottles, or 1. A careless death or a targeted one. A company divided between ambition and caution. A bottle with no label, carrying enough weight to unnerve a grown man into hiring Wolfe. That evening, while Wolfe went upstairs to tend his orchids, I sat by the window and considered. If Lawson's death was no accident, then Ward might indeed be next. And if someone was planting bottles like traps, we were dealing with a mind that preferred precision over passion. Someone who wanted the message to linger long after the wine was gone. And I had the distinct feeling that before long, they'd send another. The next morning started with Fritz informing me, in a tone fit for a funeral, that the butcher had overcharged us for veal again. Ordinarily, that would have counted as a community crisis, but I had an importer who might be in the trade for more than meat on my mind, so I told him I would file the grievance with the Hague. Wolfe was in the plant rooms with the orchids, communing, which is as close as he comes to prayer. I waited him out with the paper and a pencil, lining up a couple of calls. When he came down, he made a show of checking the clock, as if to endorse the hour personally, and asked what I had done to earn my keep. "Appointments," I said. "One with a competitor who hates Ward and Lawson on principle and profit, and one with a palate that got humiliated by Lawson in public. If anyone would know whether a bottle can be made into a weapon without smelling like one, it's a man who drinks for a living." Wolfe's brows twitched. "Who?" "Celia Rojas. Rojas and Company, Iberian stock, hard elbows, and a sommelier named Maxime Trell, who writes stingy reviews and collects grudges." Lawson laughed at him last winter at a tasting at La Salle, called his verdict barnyard poetry. Trell has never forgiven him. Puis, Wolfe said, which in this instance meant proceed. Be alert to self-justifying eloquence. Such people never lack it. Do not quarrel. Listen. Bring back facts. I left the brownstone with the agreeable feeling that Manhattan had decided to be almost polite for once. On 12th, Rojas and Company had a narrow door with a brass plate that wasn't shy. Inside, the office was crisp enough to slice your finger. Pale wood, glass, a wall map with pins like a general's plan for conquering lunch. The receptionist's cheekbones could have held up a bridge. She gave me a cool smile and a cooler minute before a door opened, and Celia Rojas herself came out, short and neat and dressed in gray that told you it had a vocabulary. She extended a hand that gave me exactly the pressure she meant to, not an ounce more. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "if you're here to poach clients, you can start with the ones who pay late." "I'm here to poach facts," I told her. "You know Ward and Lawson. I know everyone who moves a bottle within 50 miles. She led me into a small office that smelled faintly of orange peel and ink. And right now, everyone knows them. Poor Mr. Lawson. Tragic. Her tone was an ice cream sundae without the sugar. I sat. I'm not in the condolence business. What have they been to you lately, besides competition? She shrugged delicately. Annoyance. They undercut me last fall on a Tempranillo line I had nurtured. Not illegal, just crude. They promised volume they couldn't guarantee, and when the shipper missed a date, they blamed the vineyard. I lost a client. They lost face. Mr. Lawson called it market discipline. I called it adolescent. And Mr. Ward? Mr. Ward is older. He prefers to keep friends. We have spoken from time to time when Mr. Lawson's exuberance made messes. He is not a fool, which is why I'm surprised he allowed this. Her eyes flicked to mine. You're going to ask if I wanted Lawson dead. Number, I wanted him corrected. Sometimes correction is permanent. She smiled without letting it reach her eyes. So is stupidity. I do not practice either. Look here. She opened a drawer, removed a folder, and slid across a carbon copy of a letter on Ward and Lawson stationery. It was from 3 months back, signed by Lawson, threatening to sue Rojas and Company for tortious interference over a Catalan client who had considered returning to Celia's tender embrace. The prose was purple. He sent 3 of these to various colleagues. It cost him goodwill he couldn't afford. Mr. Ward tried to smooth it after. We shook hands in March. I have no desire to see Mr. Ward ruined by Mr. Lawson's ghost. You have a tidy file system for grudges, I said, pocketing the letter with her nod. Who else besides you has reason to prefer Ward without Lawson? Half the town. Start with clients who got burned by delays. Add suppliers who were promised payment terms then squeezed. Add any accountant trying to make his numbers sing. And she tilted her head. There is a woman, Lawson's sister, Agnes. She came here once to plead for discretion when Mr. Lawson was bluffing with bounced checks. I refused to be her bank. She hated him in that special way, family reserves. I wrote the name. Address? Stuyvesant Town. I don't have the number. Ask the directory. She stood. Mr. Goodwin, I enjoy a fair game. If you intend to stage one of Mr. Wolfe's theater pieces, invite me. I like to watch men who think too much, discover they've thought just enough. I told her she'd get a ticket if we printed any, and left. The second appointment was at a bar that smelled like a bar should. Good wood, better lemons, and only a hint of last night's sins. Maxime Trell held court at a corner table, as if his wineglass came with jurisdiction. He was lean, with a pianist's hands and a mouth that could fold into disdain like it had hinges. He tapped the stool next to him. I sat, and he examined me as if he were checking the legs on a decanter. You're Archie Goodwin, he said, Nero Wolfe's collector of facts and trivialities. I'll collect anything that fits in a notebook. I told him. Lawson tried to make you a punchline. Lawson tried to make everyone a punchline, Trell said, sipping. He had a palate and no humility. A dangerous combination. Dangerous how? He drank his own myth. Trell set the glass down gently. Blind tastings require respect. Labels are removed. The liquid stands naked. Lawson would shout the vineyard, vintage, soil composition, and the winemaker's underwear. He was sometimes right. When he was wrong, he laughed louder. He made enemies not by cheating, but by gloating. So I hear. Can a bottle be doctored in a way a decent palate wouldn't catch? His eyes warmed, just a hair. Ah, you want me to guess at poison? I want you to tell me what a poison that prefers wine as a taxi might look like, smell like, act like. Trell glanced at the glass. Not to drink, but as if considering asking it to consult. If you're thinking of cyanide, you want bitter almonds. But not everyone smells it. If you're thinking of arsenic, there is no aroma to save you. The stomach tells you after. Digitalis would toy with heartbeat. Oxalate could sour a wine beyond reason. But a man like Lawson might call sourness character. He believed character forgave everything. He lifted a shoulder. And if you found a bottle with no label, you found a joke. Unlabeled bottles are the grammar of blind tasting, but no metadata, no chalk mark, no docket sheet. That's not a joke. That's a message. I said, to whom? To anyone who made a life out of reading labels, he said dryly. That was Lawson, possibly Ward, possibly you. Me? You meddle, he said, but he didn't make it unkind. Tell Mr. Wolfe that if he wants a clean definition of malice in a goblet, he can find it in half the cellars of this city. But if he wants a tailor-made malice, one that points and whispers, then he is looking for a mind that dislikes chaos. A clerk, perhaps, an accountant, or a rival who was once a friend. They poison the calendar first, and the man second. I left him nursing his theory and headed back to 35th with my notebook fatter by names and adjectives. By the time I hit the stoop, I could tell something was wrong, not because the door looked different, but because it didn't. The brownstone has a way of telling you when it has been touched, the way a cat will pretend it was not, then send a look through you that says it noticed everything. Fritz was in the hall, not in the kitchen, which is eventful. He didn't wring his hands. Fritz doesn't do melodrama. But he was holding them as if he had just washed and didn't want to get the air dirty. Mr. Goodwin, he said, pitched low. Come. He took me down, past the pantry, to the wine closet. Not the real cellar, that's for show-offs. This was Fritz's working stock for the table. He gestured. The racks were tight and tidy, labels out, necks aligned. On the third row, fourth bottle in from the left, a naked green shoulder looked back at me. The label was gone, not torn, carefully soaked and removed. The glass bore a faint film where the glue had been, the way a face looks after you take off a bandage. The capsule was intact, the cork was untouched. Fritz, I said gently, when did you last see this bottle wearing clothes? This morning, he said, at 9. I came now to fetch a Riesling for dinner. I saw this. He swallowed. I touched nothing else. Anyone besides you down here since 9? No. His eyes moved and stopped. Unless someone came while Inspector Kramer was here yesterday and I was not watching the whole time. But I think, no. The door was latched. I would have heard. I sent him upstairs and did a slow, careful inspection that would have impressed a weasel. No footprints, no scuff that wasn't one of ours. The latch was unmarked. Someone had known how to come in and go out when the house was awake and the house was looking elsewhere. They had selected a bottle, removed the label, and left it precisely as a thesis. I fetched the bottle gently and brought it to the office on a tray. Wolfe was there, an hour earlier than he likes to be, leafing through a file as if it were an almanac he had written. I set the tray down and didn't have to point. He looked, and his face altered in the minimal way it does when something makes him want to move, which he doesn't. His hand flattened on the desk top. He didn't touch the glass. "Fritz found it," I said. "9 this morning it was labeled. Now it's shy. No cork disturbance." He gave me one syllable that could have meant 6 chapters. "Ah. 2 possibilities," I went on. "Either a joker in our deck peeled it yesterday when the parade was in and out and we didn't see, or someone slid in today without a calling card. Either way, it was done for us. For you. For me," he repeated, not a question. He stared another beat, then shifted his eyes to me. "This is artistry. Mr. Ward brought an unlabeled bottle and a corpse to my door. Someone has now brought the idea of unlabeled bottles into my house. They intend to teach me the grammar of their jest." He turned to the bell cord, thought better of it, and didn't pull. "The label. Did you examine the refuse pail downstairs?" "First thing. No wad, no strip, no wet paper in the sink. Whoever did it, took it." He shut his eyes and reopened them. "Call Mr. Panzer. Now." That was the green light for the best driver I know. I rang Saul, gave him the bare bones, and told him to sit on Ward until I said otherwise. Follow him, chart the visitors, note anyone who trembles as if their pockets held a secret. Saul said, 3 times, which is consent in his language, and hung up to go be invisible. Before I could report the call complete, the phone rang again. I picked up. Kramer didn't bother with hello. "Your man Wolfe home?" "He is always home," I said. "It's his party trick." "Then tell him the lab's first swipe says no cyanide in Lawson. We're not done. Don't crow. We found a second bottle in a crate at Ward and Lawson. Matching wax, no label, unopened. My men are dusting it, and if you're about to tell me you have mysterious happenings at your place, save it. I don't want to. We have mysterious happenings at our place," I said. "Someone undressed a bottle in our pantry. No more, no less." The silence on the line puffed like a cigar being relit. "Goodwin, I warned you not to enjoy my mood." "I'm eating modestly," I said. "Do you want the undressed exhibit?" "No," he snarled. "I want you to stop turning your house into a museum of metaphors. Keep the bottle. Do not drink it. If I get one more gesture from this joker, I'll nail the next hand that makes it." He hung up. I passed Wolfe the message. He pressed his lips together, then spoke so softly I had to lean. 2 bottles at Ward and Lawson, 1 here without its name, a death without the obvious venom. We are being courted, Archie." "I don't like the flowers," I said. "Who has a key?" "Us 3 and Theodore, and the repairman last spring who swapped the latch. Theodore would no more strip a label in my house than he would boil his cattle-yass." Wolfe's mouth bent. "Keys breed like rabbits in a city. Duplicates beget duplicates. Mr. Ward was here twice. Inspector Kramer and his men once. Mr. Lawson, being dead, was not. But others were. The mischief was done either under our noses yesterday, which is a rebuke, or under our roof today, which is a challenge." "Which do you prefer?" "Neither, but the second is more interesting." He drew breath. "We will accelerate. This evening you will find Agnes Lawson. Be soothing and dull. Learn the state of her finances, the warmth of her affection, and whether she has ever been into Mr. Ward's office with a grievance. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Dugan again, with less courtesy. And Mr. Nye, press him. He knows the arithmetic of this malice. And tonight?" "Tonight," he said, "we do nothing spectacular. We sit. We let our uninvited pedagogue imagine we are fretting. And we are. Fritz." Fritz appeared with such speed that I suspected he had been hovering. Wolfe pointed at the bottle. "It stays under glass in the pantry. No one touches it. For dinner, a Riesling. We will pretend to be ordinary men. Archie will not be ordinary. He will canvass the block for locksmiths and messengers who remember a face." Fritz took the tray with the same solemn care he would use to carry the host. When he had gone, Wolfe watched the empty space the bottle had left on the desk, the way a man watches the spot where a lightning bolt just kissed grass. He didn't move for a full minute. Then he made the smallest of gestures, his head dipping, and looked at me. "Archie," he said, "we have been given an etiquette to follow. For once, I will comply. I will allow myself to be disturbed." "Good," I told him, rising. "Because the man who stripped a label downstairs just wrote his RSVP. Now we find out if he's coming alone." I started with Agnes Lawson because Wolfe had assigned her the evening slot, and when Wolfe assigns an evening slot, you don't argue with the calendar. Stuyvesant Town was doing its usual impression of a place where people go to be alone together. I found Agnes in a 2-bedroom that had been taught to look like a 1-bedroom by the number of bills on the table. She was early 50s with hair that had decided to negotiate with grey rather than fight it. The room smelled like lemon polish and a candle that tried to be lavender and failed. I introduced myself, and she said she'd heard of Nero Wolfe in a voice that didn't make it a compliment or an insult. I kept it smooth. "Mrs. Lawson," I said, "I won't pretend I'm here to comfort you. I'm here because your brother's name is doing acrobatics across my boss's day and I need the net." Her mouth twitched. "Then you should know he always preferred a drum roll to silence. Sit, Mr. Goodwin." I sat. She poured me tea because that's what you pour when you want to seem calm. I didn't drink it. "You and your brother were close." "We were family," she said, which can mean either yes or absolutely not. She set the pot down and looked at me directly. "He was brilliant at wine and poor at money. He thought the one would cancel the other." "Did he owe you?" "Number he knew better." Her hands were steady. "But he asked. Last December. He wanted help covering a gap. Promised a shipment he couldn't pay for yet because another client was slow. I refused. He called me small. Then he sent flowers the next day. That was Leonard, overwrought and apologizing to the wrong person. Was the slow client real?" She tilted her head. "He wouldn't lie to me about that. He would lie about the size of the gap." "Did he make enemies?" "Besides the competition." She breathed out through her nose. "Leonard made enemies the way other men make errands. Celia Rojas, a French broker named Moreau who hates Americans who pronounce terroir like a new car. A restaurateur he humiliated at a tasting. And Henry Ward." "Ward?" "They were partners," she said evenly, which is another word for opponents who can't resign. "Henry believes in ledgers. Leonard believed in momentum. They have been arguing for 2 years. Henry called it prudence. Leonard called it fear. I called it a matter for the shareholders, which consisted of them and a lawyer who never answers the phone." "Did Leonard ever send you to smooth over a mess?" "Yes," she said. "Celia Rojas once. He'd bounced a check and asked me to explain him. I declined. I don't translate foolishness." She picked up the tea and sipped. "Is Henry your client?" "He's the one who brought the bottle." "So a man who hates debt has come to you to buy absolution." Her mouth curved without humor. "Tell Mr. Wolfe to charge him twice." "Was your brother frightened lately?" "Of scarcity," she said. "Of irrelevance." "Not of people." She set the cup down, fingers careful. "But 2 weeks ago he asked me if I had a spare key to Mother's sideboard." I let that sit. "Why would he want it?" "He said he wanted to borrow some old paper." I told him there was nothing in there but stamps, my father's cufflinks, and a few deeds that have been worthless since 1972. He laughed. "Philately won't save me," he said. I told him nothing will save a man who refuses to recognize the cost of things. She looked at me again. "He wasn't stupid, Mr. Goodwin. He simply believed that audacity was a currency the bank would accept. He was wrong. Did he drink from unlabeled bottles at home?" A flicker. "Blind tastings, yes. He liked to perform. He'd bring a bottle, peel it in the kitchen, wrap it in foil, and ask friends to guess. I stopped coming to those dinners." "Why?" "Because he liked being right more than being loved," she said, and the sentence didn't wobble. I asked a few more questions to make sure there weren't any cousins with grudges or creditors with guns, got a Stye Town hallway draft on the way out, and called Wolfe from the sidewalk. I gave him the highlights. He hummed at spare key to mother's sideboard in a way that meant file the phrase under possible jokes that aren't jokes, and told me to proceed to the locksmiths and messengers on the block. The canvas felt like a dance I've done before. Bell ringing, polite face, the script about recent service calls, and the gentle prod for any memory featuring our address. 3 locksmiths within 6 blocks. 2 said no. 1 said maybe. The maybe belonged to a fellow named Carp in a basement on Madison who smelled like brass and cigarettes and had fingers that moved as if they were made of little keys. He squinted at my card. Nero Wolfe, he said, as if tasting the name. I know the building. Did a latch there last spring. Right. Did you make duplicates? Not unless someone paid me in cash and flattered my mother, he said. We swap cylinders. We don't hand out party favors, but... He tugged at his lower lip. A young man came in last week with a cylinder like yours. Wanted a repin. Said he was a superintendent. I told him to bring a letter on building letterhead. He never came back. Describe him. Tall, narrow face, hair that wants to be tidy and loses the fight. Hands like he's used to paper, not tools. Nice shoes? Scuffed at the toe. Nye, I said aloud, before my internal editor could cuff me. Carp shrugged. I just saw a face. I don't keep a gallery. But if you find him, tell him not to insult me with fake letters. I've seen better counterfeits on soup cans. I left Carp a thank you that looked like a bill and stepped into evening with a name ringing in my head like it had been dropped down a well. I dialed Saul. He was in a quiet voice. He met a woman, he said. Ward? Yes, a lobby bar on Lexington. He looked like a man who wanted to appear unconcerned. Saul doesn't do poetry unless it pays. The woman late 30s. Dark hair, knows where to look when she lies. I have her face. They spoke 20 minutes. She passed him a small envelope under a menu. Name? She paid cash at the bar. The bartender called her Miss Denton. He didn't know if it was real. She left through the side door, took a cab, changed cabs, then walked 2 blocks for nothing. Now she's in a 3rd floor walk-up off 2nd. Keep the address. Don't knock. I paused. Anything else? Ward trembled when he pocketed the envelope, Saul said. Then he steadied, like a man who needed permission. I told him about Carp and Nye and Agnes's sideboard and got a single that meant the pot was starting to cluck. Then I headed back to the brownstone to deliver the day's catch. Wolfe was in the office, not in the plant rooms, which told me my timing was good. Fritz had set out beer and pretzels, which told me my timing was perfect. I reported in full Agnes's frankness, the faux superintendent at the locksmith, Saul's eavesdropping and Miss Denton's envelope. Wolfe listened, making the little grunts and eyelid adjustments that stand in for applause. When I finished, he tapped his fingertip once on the arm of his chair. Keys, he said. Spare keys, counterfeit permission, a bottle stripped of its name in our pantry without visible disturbance. Mr. Nye is our clerk who loves arithmetic. He may also love locks. Mr. Ward is receiving comfort from a woman who prefers cash. And Leonard Lawson asked for access to old paper 2 weeks ago. The pattern is beginning to print. I'd like the rest of the sentence, I said. In due course. He shifted his mass a millimeter toward the bell cord and then away. Call Mr. Nye. Invite him at 9. Tell him candidly that we know he attempted a repin on a cylinder that resembles mine. Gauge his reaction. If he refuses, fetch him. Fetch. Legally, Wolfe murmured, which is how he says improvise. Before I could dial, the phone beat me to it. Kramer's baritone came through with a crackle that could have been the wire or his self-control. Goodwin, We've got a prelim on tox. No cyanide, no strychnine. Small traces of methanol, enough to insult a liver, not to kill a man outright. There's a possibility of ethylene glycol, but we're not calling it. Could be cross-contamination. We're not done. Celebrate nothing. I know the rules, I said. We've got a fresh trick. Someone undressed a bottle downstairs today. Also, a locksmith remembers a guy who looks like Nye trying to get cute with a cylinder like ours. Peter Nye. Paper rustled. Ward and Lawson's numbers, boy. The same. And Saul has Ward meeting a woman with an envelope. Miss Denton, Kramer said. We've had her on little things. She's an expediter. Makes problems walk in straight lines for a fee. Such as getting papers signed, such as getting papers lost, Kramer said. Do me a favor and don't have a party before I get there. I will sell you a ticket, I said, and hung up before he could advise me on my social life. At 9 sharp, Nye arrived. He came with his corners tucked in, as if ironing could fix character. He sat where I put him, knees too close together, eyes moving as if after images were useful. Wolfe didn't make him squirm. He just looked at him until the room realized it would have to be honest. Mr. Nye, he said, you took a cylinder to a locksmith last week and attempted to have it repinned. You described yourself as a superintendent. The locksmith declined. Why? Nye's lips parted and then reconsidered. He tried for indignation and got as far as dismay. What? Number I went to buy screws. Pfui, Wolfe said softly. You are not built for lying. Do not attempt it in here. You work for Mr. Ward. You keep the books. You knew Mr. Lawson was careless, and you knew his carelessness would cost you. Not because you are liable, but because you are the sort of man who assumes responsibility when fools create deficits. So you sought a key. For what? Nye stared at the carpet. Mr. Ward asked me to secure the file room. After the bottle arrived, he was afraid. He said he wanted to be sure no one could get in without us knowing. You proposed to change the lock, Wolfe said. On whose idea? Mine. It came out a whisper. I thought, if someone was planting things, if they could get in. Into your office, Wolfe said. Or into mine. Nye looked up, startled enough to be honest. Into yours. Why would anyone? Because someone did, I said, and gave him the tidy version of our pantry striptease. He swallowed. I didn't touch your house, he said. I swear it. I went to Carp, and he sent me away. I told Mr. Ward, and he told me not to try again. Did he tell you why? Wolfe asked. Because he had someone, Nye said, and the words looked like they hurt. He said he knew a person who could take care of it. He didn't name them. Miss Denton, I said, and Nye didn't object. That was enough. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Nye, do not leave town. Tell Mr. Ward he is to present himself here at 11 tomorrow with Miss Denton and Dugan. If they fail, I shall borrow Inspector Kramer's mood and hand it to him in person. You will now answer one last question. Were there 2 bottles at your warehouse? Nye's throat worked. Yes, he said. 2 that I saw. One in the crate yesterday. Another this morning in a different crate. I didn't tell the police because Mr. Ward told me to keep quiet until we understood. We are trying, Wolfe said. That will do. I walked Nye out with the smile I use for men who tell half the truth and think they'll get credit. When I came back, Wolfe hadn't moved, but the air around him felt warmer by a degree, the way a stove does when it remembers it can. Tomorrow, he said, we invite them. Tonight we keep watch. Someone has made free with our sanctuary and expects us to react like men who have lost their nerves. And we haven't, I said. We have not, he agreed. But we have noticed. He shut his eyes for a brief minute. Archie, check the back entrance again, top to bottom, then sleep. Not deeply. I checked. I slept. Not deeply. Around 2 a.m., a shadow slid across the alley like a thought that didn't want to be recognized. It paused at our gate and kept going, which meant it either had the wrong house or the right timetable. I made a note of the shoes, soft soles, a little drag on the right. Then I lay back down and realized the case had moved a quiet notch forward in the dark. Somebody had brought a game to our door and into our pantry. Tomorrow, we'd bring them into the office and see how they played when the board was ours. I woke on the early side for a man in my line of work and checked the alley from my window before coffee. The usual collection of cans and the same polite strip of morning light. No shadow with a limp. If the night visitor had business here, he'd either finished it or rescheduled. Fritz was in the kitchen making the coffee count as breakfast and the eggs count as an argument for civilization. Wolfe was already in the plant rooms, so I took my mug, did a slow reconnaissance of the back stair and pantry latch, and found nothing fresh. No scratches, no flakes, no insult I could put on paper. It was still an insult, and Wolfe doesn't tolerate those well. At 9:30, Saul called. He doesn't waste syllables. He places them like chessmen. He left his building at 8:15, he said. He meant Ward. Went to a bank, then to a diner on 10th. Met the woman again. Ms. Denton. No envelope today. She slid him a folded note. He read it and tore it in half, left the halves under the plate. I have them. You order the bacon? I asked. I ordered the plate, Saul said. It tasted like paper. After that, he took a cab to the warehouse. He went in alone through the side door. Dugan opened it. Nye arrived 10 minutes later with a folder. They all went upstairs. Any tales on you? One who thinks he's invisible because he looks like a coat rack, Saul said. He's not mine. He's theirs. He waits, then follows Ward when Ward leaves. Soft shoes, right foot drags a little. I met his shadow last night, I told him. Keep your distance and keep him in the notebook. 11 o'clock, they're all supposed to be here. Ward, Dugan, and Miss Denton if she doesn't decide Cash is quieter than Wolfe. Help them make good choices. Uh-huh, Saul said, and was gone. Wolfe had returned to the office by the time I finished feeding the morning into my notes. He listened, eyes at a half-mast, until I mentioned the coat rack with a limp. The lids rose a notch. We do not want a prowler who thinks himself clever lingering within scent, he said. He will be curious at noon. Lock the gate at 10:50. Admit no one but those we summon. Kramer won't like that. He can ring the bell with the others when I call him, Wolfe said. He tugged the bell cord for Fritz, not because he needed anything but to remind the house that the rhythm would be kept. Fritz appeared, and Wolfe told him to keep the kitchen door bolted and to stay out of the pantry until we were done. Fritz nodded like a man accepting a vow. Before the hour hand got bored, the phone took a turn. It wasn't Kramer, it was Celia Rojas, and she had removed the sugar from her tone and left the spoon rattling. Goodwin, she said. You asked yesterday if I enjoyed a fair game. I'm calling because someone just delivered me a joke I'm too grown to laugh at. A joke with a cork? I asked. A crate on my loading dock with straw and one bottle, she said. No label, red wax, the whole costume. There is also a card inside with 2 words on it. Ask Wolfe. I'm not in the mood for scavenger hunts. I kept my voice in the calm family. Touch nothing. I'll put your loading dock on the city's list of popular tourist attractions. We'll let the police pose for photographs. If I see a single camera, she said, I'll smash it. The address is the same. The doorman will be instructed not to flirt with uniforms. Good morning. She broke the line. I gave Wolfe the transcript. He let out a wordless sound that wasn't approval. So, he said, our pedagogue widens his syllabus. He wants me implicated as curator of the unlabeled. It's a tidy message, I said. With postage. It is a stupidity, he said. But an instructive one. He dipped his head. Call Inspector Kramer. Inform him that a 3rd instance of our clownish totem has appeared. Tell him where. Tell him that Ms. Rojas dislikes cameras. I did. Kramer didn't congratulate me for brightening his day. I'm 5 minutes away from tearing your bell out of its wiring, he said. Now I have to deploy a squad to babysit a bottle that wants to be famous. Consider it public relations, I said. You can use the brownie points with the wine community. Wine community, he said, and mangled the phrase. Sit tight, and don't upstage me at 11. If you're staging one of your theater pieces, I want a chair. Or a cigar, I suggested, and hung up before he could contribute to my vocabulary. At 10:30, I'd done all the pacing Wolfe could stand, and he ordered me to sit. He looked past me, not through me. When he gets that look, he's watching the case assemble itself like a structure out of blocks, and he doesn't like what it's building. He lifted a finger. Archie, the note Saul recovered, have him photograph it and bring the halves, and tell him to encourage Miss Denton's cooperation. Mr. Ward is employing an instrument without knowing if it plays on his side of the orchestra. Fritz announced guests through the crack of the door at 10:57, formal as a maitre d'. I went down to the front to keep Wolfe's choreography intact. The stoop had gathered its characters. Henry Ward with a tie using all its willpower to stay straight, Dugan wearing his shoulders like they had arrested people before, and a woman who owned her heels and could walk in them, Miss Denton. She was $10 of lipstick and several $100s of restraint. Behind them, across the street, a man had found a lamp post intensely interesting. The right shoe scuffed when he moved an inch to keep his angle. Saul was nowhere visible, which is evidence he was where he should be. I brought them in with a quick search that I sold as courtesy and started them into the office. Wolfe didn't get up. He doesn't. He looked like a portrait that had decided to be three-dimensional long enough to speak. "Thank you for coming," he said, neutral enough to soothe a roomful of porcupines. "Sit. Mr. Ward, your Miss Denton sits near you. Mr. Dugan opposite her." He flicked eyes at me. "Bolts." I slid the bolt on the office door at his nod. That sound is not common in the brownstone during daylight hours, and it did remarkable things to people's posture. "Mr. Ward," Wolfe began, "you recently received a communication from Miss Denton." He glanced toward the side table where Saul had silently deposited an envelope moments before in one of his older tricks. Wolfe went on, "This communication advised you, in essence, to stay quiet, to let others move, and to trust that the problem would be moved away from you. Did it not?" Ward's brow glistened. He looked at Ms. Denton. There was a note. It suggested I avoid further contact with the police until I don't recall the words. "I do," Wolfe said. He unfolded the halves, now dry and lying flat. It read, "Keep steady. Do not volunteer. We will remove what endangers you." Signed with neither name nor courtesy. "Ms. Denton, did you write that?" Her eyes held level. "I encourage clients to avoid panic," she said. "That's not a crime." "It is not," Wolfe agreed. "But its context may be. You have two roles. In one, you are an expediter, arranging meetings, smoothing edges, facilitating the movement of papers. In the other, you're a courier between anxious men and less anxious ones. Which role did you play here?" "The first," she said. Mr. Ward felt harassed. A bottle appeared without a history. Then the police appeared with too much of one. I told him to wait until he had clearer counsel. "From whom?" Wolfe asked. "From me," she said, "and from an associate who understands supply chains and how mischief rides them." Wolfe's lids didn't blink. "Name the associate." "No," she said easily. "I protect my clients." "Which ones?" I asked. "The living ones or the dead ones?" Dugan's hands made fists without asking permission. "You don't talk to a lady like that," he said, and kept his seat only because his legs remembered chairs. "Mr. Dugan," Wolfe said, "we're not trifling. I suggest you tell me now why you opened the side door for Mr. Ward this morning." Dugan's jaw shifted. "Because he's my boss." Because he paid you to let him in when the police were guarding the front, Wolfe said, and because he wanted to retrieve something or deposit something without being observed. Which? I don't... Which? Wolfe said again, quieter. Dugan's eyes moved toward as if the answer might be written on a cuff. It wasn't. He looked back at Wolfe. Deposit, he said finally. A folder. Nice folder, I said. Ferried by a man who tried to get a cylinder repinned and didn't. Miss Denton's eyes slid to me. Cool. Mr. Nye is trying to protect his employer's records from wandering hands. Whose hands? Wolfe asked. The police's, she said, as if the word had an odor. And the press's. You know how they are. Yes, Wolfe said dryly. But I also know that when people move records quietly, they often move guilt with them. Mr. Ward, what was in the folder? Ward folded inward like paper in rain. Invoices, he muttered. Nothing criminal. Criminality is not decided by mutter, Wolfe said. A practical now. Inspector Kramer is on his way. Ms. Rojas has been afflicted with our plague, and he will visit her before he rings me. Before he does, we will agree on certain truths. He turned the head an inch. Mr. Ward, you received a bottle that killed your partner. You then allowed a second bottle to be present in your warehouse, without informing the police immediately. Mr. Nye saw it. You told him to keep quiet. Ms. Denton wrote you a note encouraging silence. Mr. Dugan opened a side door to move a file. While this transpired, someone undressed a bottle in my pantry. This was not amateurism. It was posture. Therefore, the bell rang. Not the doorbell. Ours. Fritz's chime, the one he uses when he wants us to know the world is acquiring volume. Wolfe sighed. Archie, unbolt. Admit Inspector Kramer if it is he, and if it is not, use the discretion I overpay you for. It was Kramer. He didn't wait for an invitation after I opened. He bulldozed to the office with Pearlie a yard behind, took in the room in a sweep, and didn't look thrilled to find a quorum without a gavel. His cigar was not lit, which meant we had perfect weather for thunder. Don't stand, he said to no one. And then to me, don't lock that door again while I'm here or I'll remove it. His eyes landed on Ms. Denton. You. Inspector, she said, serene like a fountain. You're the kind of problem I like because you can't be solved by a lab, he said. He rounded on Ward. I just held a third bottle at Rojas and Company with wax like a blood clot and no label. It had a card in it with Wolfe's address. I'm not in the mood for art. If anyone in this room thinks they're composing, stop. If anyone knows who is, say. You have my opinion, Wolfe said, unruffled. Someone with access to supply and to paper is orchestrating this. Someone orderly. Someone who has learned how to impersonate authority, the superintendent pose, the side door. Someone who knows fear and can sell calm. The unlabeled bottle is a symbol, Inspector. It represents the removal of identity and the claim that meaning persists without it. Save the seminar, Kramer snapped. Give me a name. Not yet, Wolfe said, but I will give you a lever. He focused on Denton. Ms. Denton, you will tell Inspector Kramer the name of the man you call the associate, the one who moves your documents and engineers your delivery mishaps. If you do not, I will inform him in front of you in 10 minutes, and you will have lost the only advantage your job confers. She gave Wolfe a look that would have moved a lighter man back an inch. Wolfe weighs more than an inch. She took a breath. He consults, she said, for several firms. Logistics. Quiet fixes. He has a card that says Lawford Services. 2 F's for flourish. His name is Martin Lawford. Kramer's pencil appeared like a bad thought. Address. Brooklyn, Navy Yard area. He likes docks because men don't ask names there. She flicked a glance at Ward. He's who I meant when I told Henry to wait. I thought Lawford would... Remove what endangers him, Wolfe finished. Yes. He dropped his chin. Mr. Lawford, then, is our clerk. With ambitions, he could plant bottles, remove labels, misdirect shipments, arrange side door moments, and coach frightened partners to be docile. You will fetch him, Inspector. Kramer let the corner of his mouth move in what a generous man might call a smile. You don't say, he said. He turned to Pearlie. Get a car. Put 2 on Rojas's dock. Nobody touches that thing without my hand. Then go to the Navy Yard and bring me a Lawford. If he resists, bring me 2. Pearlie went. Kramer stayed. He planted himself and puffed without lighting, staring at Ward until Ward tried to smooth his tie again and made it worse. Wolfe didn't shift. He had positioned the board. Now he waited for one piece to stumble. It took 6 minutes. The house was silent, the way our house gets before it decides to remember its age. Then a sound slid under the back door through the floorboards. Small, like a cork tapping wood. I moved first. Wolfe's head ticked, permission granted, and I was out of the office and down the hall. The kitchen was empty. The pantry door was closed. The bolt was thrown. I lifted it and eased in, slow and sideways. On the 3rd shelf, where the naked shoulder had been yesterday, a bottle sat. Not naked, but misnamed. The label was there and wrong. It claimed a Riesling from a winery Fritz has never purchased. The font was a counterfeit's idea of style. The capsule was nicked, just enough to show someone had tested it and decided to leave it for us to admire. On the floor, near the baseboard, a flake the color of dried blood winked. Wax, not ours. I didn't lift the bottle. I left it on the shelf and backed out, relatching the door. When I returned to the office, Wolfe watched me cross the rug and didn't ask. He doesn't when the answer will be better unbroken. They put one back dressed wrong, I said, and they shed. He nodded once, a heavy weight registering on a scale. Inspector, he said, you will have your man. Meanwhile, our pedagogue has repeated himself. Mr. Goodwin, call Dr. Vollmer. Invite him to stand over that bottle while your men photograph it, Inspector, and while mine listen to it. Fritz will not serve it with dinner. Try, Fritz said from the door with a severity he keeps for men who joke with his pantry, and vanished to fetch a tray and make a room smell like order again. Kramer grunted, not at the joke, but at the fact of it. He dragged on the unlit cigar like it could hear him. If your Navy Yard consultant tells me he likes wine, he said, I'll give him a label. Make it legible, Wolfe murmured. Our friend dislikes clarity only when he applies it to others. When it comes to himself, he will be fond of it. At the far end of the conversation, down the hall where a house keeps its noises, the gate clicked. It could have been the weather. It wasn't. I didn't move. Saul would be out there. He'd be counting footfalls and tracing the more interesting ones. Wolfe looked at Ward. You are being shepherded, Mr. Ward, he said gently, by men who prefer their sheep docile. You are not a sheep. Do you understand me? Ward lifted his head like a man who wants to. Yes, he said. Good, Wolfe said. Then stop bleating. Sit still. Listen. The room held its breath. We had a name we could chase and a hand we could catch with wax on it. We had a pantry where the etiquette had been violated again and the brownstone had noticed twice. The pressure had done what it was supposed to do. It had sharpened the edges. Now the board belonged to Wolfe, and he'd begin to move pieces with the flick of a finger and a sentence that felt like a shove. Archie, he said low, make the final calls. Bring Vollmer. Put a second on Ms. Denton. And tell Saul, if our coat rack limps toward the gate again, he is to be guided into conversation. I would like to know whether he can read a label. Vollmer arrived with the air of a man who has traded a waiting room of coughs for a puzzle that might cough back. He set his bag on Fritz's spotless counter and asked for the pantry as if requesting the time. I took him in with Kramer 2 paces behind and Wolfe's instructions hanging in the air like a sign. Do not touch, do not sniff, and above all, do not declare before the evidence has had the courtesy to introduce itself. Vollmer doesn't need signs. He studied the imposter label, the nicked capsule, and the flake of foreign wax I'd left where it lay, then gave a small grunt that meant he was satisfied with the facts, but not with the universe that supplied them. He used tweezers, a paper envelope, a magnifier, and a patience that could have seasoned a stew. When he was done, he sealed the flake, noted the nick, and recommended that the bottle be lifted, cradled, and escorted to the dining room table where he could swab the exterior without making the pantry feel like a clinic. Kramer let a team in to photograph, then shooed them away with the economy of a man who knows every extra footstep is a leak. Pearlie had already gone to net Lawford. A uniform held the kitchen door like it might confess. Fritz hovered outside the arc of the activity with his hands folded and a look that would have discouraged a riot. When Vollmer finished swabbing and itemizing, he straightened and addressed no one in particular. "If you open this, do it somewhere that has forgiven many sins," he said mildly. "Not here." "We won't," I told him. "Our sins come à la carte." Back in the office, Wolfe accepted Vollmer's report with a nod and an invoice with a second, grander nod. Dr. V departed, satisfied that if anyone killed themselves in the next hour with a mislabeled Riesling, it wouldn't be on his conscience. Kramer planted again. Miss Denton watched the room's temperature. Ward held on to the armrests like a sailor to a railing he didn't trust. Dugan sat ready to object to anything on principle. "Called Saul," he answered in his movement voice. "Your lamppost is named Harrow," he said. Harrodbo. Registered to a security outfit that sells discretion by the month. He limps because something went wrong long ago and he never learned to compensate. He says he's on retainer to Lawford for asset reassurance. I have him in a diner where the coffee forgives nothing. You want him delivered? Not yet, I said. Keep him under your hat. Pearlie's shopping for Lawford. If he misses, you'll close the aisle. I added the pantry development and Vollmer's verdict, such as it was, and got an that covered appreciation and contempt for showmanship. When I hung up, Wolfe's eyes were on me as if I were a chess clock he could read to the second. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "ring Miss Rojas. Ask if the card in her crate said only, 'Ask Wolfe,' or if it said more. Then ring Mr. Nye and tell him to stop looking at numbers long enough to tell the truth. He is not our criminal, he is our weather vane." Rojas answered on the first ring, having instructed the universe to make space for her calls. "They took it," she said without preface. "Your inspector came and took it." The card said, "Ask Wolfe" on one side, and on the other, a line, "You overpay for labels. Tell your big man he can keep the insult. I want the hand that wrote it." "Stand by," I said. "We may stage a recital." She made a skeptical sound and cut the line. Nye took longer and arrived more breathless. "Mr. Goodwin, I'm at my desk." "Not for long," I said. "You're coming back. Bring the ledger for special consignments for the last 6 months and the log of side door entries. And, Peter, this time when you tell me what you've been told to do, don't subtract the parts where you disagreed." He agreed in a noise and hung up. Wolfe hadn't moved, but the room had. It happens. A case swells like a lung and then holds, waiting for the next breath. Kramer glanced at his watch and at me. "Pearlie better bring me something with a name," he muttered. "If Lawford's as tidy as you make him, he won't be in the first place we look." "He won't be," Wolfe said. "Men like Lawford love second places. They are second sons of order." "Speak English," Kramer said. "He is a facilitator," Wolfe said. "He removes identity in a system that worships it. He can switch labels and bills of lading, personalities and permissions. When such a man decides to threaten, he invokes anonymity and pretends it is art. He writes on a card, 'Ask Wolfe,' because he believes a name is an address. He is mistaken. A name is an argument." Miss Denton had been tranquil as a pool. Now she shifted, the smallest change in the surface. He doesn't threaten, she said, and then toned it down. He resolves. That is why we hire him. Men who resolve are often the only ones who know how to break, Wolfe said. You introduce him to nervous clients, Miss Denton, and he sells them calm. Did he also sell one of them the idea that a bottle can be made into a totem, that a death can be turned into a seminar? She met his eyes. No one has to sell men ideas that flatter their fear, she said. They pay for those without encouragement. The bell rang again. Fritz announced Mr. Nye with a gravity I wouldn't mind at my funeral. Nye came in tight as a spool, with 2 ledgers, and the look of a man who knows he's about to be turned like a jar lid. I took the books, put them on Wolfe's desk, and stood at the corner like a shelf that could talk if asked. Open to the week of the bottle, Wolfe told him. Nye open to yesterday. The entries were neat and small and had the humility good numbers acquire when they're written by a man who doesn't want them to be misinterpreted. 2 special consignments had been logged with no invoice numbers, just intake times and a clerk's initials. The initials were his. Why log them at all? Wolfe asked. Because I didn't want them to vanish, Nye said, flushing. Mr. Ward told me to wait, but if I didn't make a line, if I didn't draw a thread, then later I wouldn't be able to say what had happened, not even to myself. Good, Wolfe said, and the word was a gift. The side door log. Nye opened the second book. It wasn't official. It was a little brown notebook with dates and ticks. 4 side door entries in the last week. 1 was police. 1 was a delivery we could verify. 2 were Ward, marked owner in Nye's cramped hand. Who started the side door habit? I asked. Dugan, Nye said, and Dugan grunted the way a man does when facts refuse to be noble. He hates the front because it makes him feel watched. It's because the front is watched, Dugan said, not ashamed. I like my work without an audience. Kramer was taking this in with that heavy-lidded look that means he's printing the page in his head. If Lawford doesn't give me something I can arrest before dinner, he said, I'll take the 2 of you as consolation prizes. Wolfe breathed in. The air around his nostrils moved like a weather report. Inspector, he said, why do you suppose our friend left a misnamed bottle in my pantry this morning? To aggravate me, Kramer said promptly, then caught himself. Or to see if you would call me. He knew he would, Wolfe said. That was the wager. But he also needed to move something in and out, so he used the pantry as alibi. A theatrically wrong bottle to justify a visit under the kitchen's nose. Mr. Goodwin, after lunch you will check the drawers by the pantry window. If anything was borrowed, it will either be returned or carefully rearranged. You think he planted more than wine? I asked. I think he likes the theme too much to repeat it without a counterpoint, Wolfe said. He is. Composing. When men compose, they echo. Saul called again. Your coat rack tried your gate, he said. I let him try. He found it shut and thought about making it not. Then he thought about me. We had a talk. And? He says he's on a retainer that will expire when a signature lands on a certain paper, Saul said. He wouldn't say which paper, but his eyes liked the word transfer. He also says his orders are to watch Ward and discourage improvisation. He uses the word discourage like a small, steady fist. He's not a killer. He's a stopper. Where is he now? Where I put him, Saul said. In a chair that isn't comfortable. Lawford called while we talked. I listened. He told our friend to hold angle at Wolfe's place until noon and then migrate to the warehouse for an escort. I'm going to the Navy Yard side street you gave me and put eyes there in case Pearlie misses a back door. Do, I said. And if Lawford comes out smelling like labels, blow him a kiss for me. Uh-huh, Saul said, and left the line empty. I relayed. Kramer stood, too fast for his size, and jabbed the dead cigar at me like the baton of a conductor refusing to indulge a soloist. If Pearlie gets there and finds nobody, I'll use your man's angle, he said. Don't move anyone in this room. We won't, I said. It's not our policy to scatter suspects when the inspector wants them bunched. He left. The office felt larger without his weather in it. Wolfe closed his eyes for one of those short minutes he gives the world when he'd rather give it none. Then he opened them and said, "Miss Denton, tell me why you met Mr. Ward first at a lobby bar, then in a diner." "Privacy," she said. "Privacy that the lobby gives and the diner confirms," Wolfe mused, as if tasting the phrase. "Because your associate wanted to see who else saw, because he likes to count. Did he tell you to bring Mr. Ward to me with the bottle?" "No," she said, honest because it cost nothing here. "That was Henry. He panicked and went to the biggest name he could think of that didn't wear a badge. I told him to keep quiet afterward because I wanted Lawford to tidy up the panic." "By moving papers," I said. "By moving a problem out of sight," she corrected. "It is not the same thing." "It never is," I said, and enjoyed the angle of her chin when I did. Fritz came to the door, and I braced for culinary news. He gave Wolfe the smallest of nods, the one that says the kitchen is prepared to accept absurdity as long as dinner is served at 7. Wolfe returned it with a gratitude he rarely wastes on the mortal. Noon found us with silence in the halls and noise in our heads. Then the phone rang, and even before I picked up, I knew it would be Pearlie. He isn't a man who lends his voice to a phone unless it has earned him the right. "Got him," he said. Lawford was packing a briefcase and an opinion of himself. He tried to talk me out of it. I prefer facts. We're bringing him. "Whole?" I asked. "Whole and a little softer around the language," Pearlie said. "Save me a seat." I told the room, and Miss Denton's face flickered like a pilot light in a draft. Ward took in a breath that almost made a sound. Wolfe did not exhibit contentment. He rotated a finger's width in the chair as if he had just reminded his muscles they were his. He looked at me. "Archie," he said, calm as a metronome. "Call Miss Rojas. Invite her for 3 o'clock. Call Agnes Lawson. If she asks why, tell her because a bottle without a name has found its voice. Call Mr. Carp at the locksmith and ask him to drop by with his ledger. We will remove the pretense that keys are accidental, and call Inspector Kramer to inform him that at 3 we will have a recital. He dislikes my theater, but he likes my endings." "You're staging the gathering," I said. "I am," he said. "Our pedagogue has assigned his final lesson. We will correct his work." I picked up the phone and began to pull the cast into place, one ring at a time. Outside, the city made its indifferent afternoon noises. Inside, the brownstone listened. The bottle on our table sat mute and wrong, the foreign wax sealed in its envelope like a signature someone forgot to hide. We had the man who moved labels and the woman who moved notes, the partner who trembled, the foreman who opened doors, the clerk who tried to make locks behave, and a sister who had learned to decline love when it came in the wrong shape. Wolfe had reached the moment he likes and dreads, the last quiet before he speaks. He closed his eyes, once only, then opened them and looked at me as if to confirm that I was there and the furniture hadn't rearranged itself in his absence. "Archie," he said low. "Set the chairs. Put Mr. Ward opposite Mr. Lawford, Miss Denton between them, Miss Rojas by the globe, Mr. Nye nearest the door, Inspector Kramer wherever he likes, and me?" I asked. "You," he said, "everywhere at once." By 2:30, the house had been rearranged into a courtroom that dressed as a drawing room. Fritz had done the chairs as Wolfe wanted, angles set to encourage glances to cross and excuses to collide. I put water on a side table, plain, not the kind that thinks bubbles make it superior, and checked the door bolts again. The brownstone wasn't sulking exactly. It was bracing. When Wolfe asks it to be a stage, it remembers lines. They came in with the punctuality of people who think their time should be respected. Rojas first, brisk and trim to the point, eyes doing inventory. She gave the room one professional nod and took the chair by the globe as instructed. as if a map was useful to have nearby in case she decided we were all on the wrong continent. Agnes Lawson followed a minute later, composed, neat, holding a handbag, like it might try to climb away if she eased her grip. I settled her on the sofa, not a defendant's chair, not a witness box. Then Carp, the locksmith, with his ledger under his arm and brass in his fingers from habit. He smelled faintly of metal and ground coffee and looked like a man who trusted lists more than people. Nye was already there from earlier, trying to minimize his surface area. At 2:50, a clump of weather arrived in the shape of Inspector Kramer. He had chosen to light the cigar this time, which meant either he had good news or he intended to make his own. He planted where he could see everybody and dared a chair to squeal. I stood by the door, listening for Pearlie's step. I can tell it from the hall boards. At 2:57, there it was. Steady, not sorry. The knob turned and Pearlie brought in a man I would have picked out of a lineup even if no one had pointed. Middle height, middle build, middle part in the hair. His hobby was blending with furniture. He had a briefcase handcuffed to his right wrist and the kind of eyes that record. He took a single professional glance that pinned exits and angles, then looked at Wolfe like a surveyor, estimating a hill he might be paid to move or to leave alone. "Martin Lawford," Pearlie said, as if reading the label on a can he didn't plan to buy. He set him where Wolfe had planned him, opposite Ward, who was developing shine again despite the room temperature. Miss Denton slipped in with a late sheen, a courtesy smile, and a stillness that would have made an actress jealous. Dugan came last, large and unhappy about it, shoulders telling me they'd prefer a warehouse to a rug. When the circle had no gaps left, Wolfe let the room breathe once, then spoke. "Thank you," he said, and made it sound like a statement of fact rather than gratitude. "I've asked you all here because someone has been teaching us a perverse lesson that names and labels do not matter. He is wrong. They matter very much. So we will use them." His eyes moved, pinning each name where it sat. Miss Rojas, Mrs. Lawson, Mr. Carp, Mr. Nye, Mr. Dugan, Miss Denton, Mr. Ward, Mr. Lawford, Inspector. The cigar twitched. Wolfe settled. "We will proceed with as little ceremony as suits me. Mr. Carp, you will confirm that last week a man brought you a cylinder similar to the one that fits my back door and you refused to repin it without documentation." Carp opened his book like a priest opening a missal. "Confirmed," he said. "Date, Tuesday. Time, 3:15. My assistant wrote the description. Tall, narrow face, careful shoes. He said he was a super. I told him I'm not a clown." "Narrow face," Wolfe repeated, and didn't look at Nye because he didn't have to. "Thank you. That attempted prudence was clumsy, but not criminal." He slid on. "Ms. Rojas, a crate arrived at your loading dock this morning with a single unlabeled bottle and a card saying Ask Wolfe, and the line you overpay for labels." "True?" "True," she said. "And rude." "Rudeness is part of the theme," Wolfe said. "Mr. Ward, your warehouse has received 2 such bottles in 2 days without invoices." He didn't wait for affirmation. "One of your partners died after sampling one. The lab at present is unconvinced by obvious poisons. Another bottle with a counterfeit label appeared in my pantry today. This is an insult rather than a threat. And an earlier bottle in my pantry had its label removed to deliver the same tired sermon." He shifted his head a degree toward Lawford. "Mr. Lawford, you consult in logistics. You arrange deliveries, reschedulings, reassignments. Did you arrange the deliveries labeled with nothing?" Lawford had a decent voice. It could have sold you a timetable you didn't need. "No," he said politely. "Did you arrange the misdelivery of a conscience?" Wolfe inquired. "Did you advise Miss Denton to advise Mr. Ward to be silent while you moved an embarrassment from one shelf to another?" "I advise clients to avoid making noise that attracts scavengers," Lawford said. "Noise is a tax." "A philosopher," Wolfe murmured. Inspector, please note, the man speaks in aphorisms. That's often a symptom of clotted thought. He went on without a ripple. Mr. Dugan, you opened the side door this morning for Mr. Ward and for Mr. Nye. Did you also open for another, a man with a limp? Dugan's eyes cut to Ward, then back. Not today, he said. Last night after closing, I heard a step that didn't belong. I checked the side and saw him. His chin twitched at Lawford. He said he was checking the door. I told him the door was fine. Lawford didn't change tint. You told me I had no business there, he said evenly. You were correct. Why were you there? Wolfe asked. Because Miss Denton told me Mr. Ward was nervous, and nervous clients do stupid things. I wanted to prevent one. He spread his fingers a half-inch to show he had nothing up his sleeves. Wolfe moved his gaze to Agnes. Mrs. Lawson, 2 weeks ago, your brother asked for a key to your late mother's sideboard to borrow some old paper. You declined. What old paper could he have meant? She held his eyes. The only papers there were certificates. Things from our father's businesses that don't carry weight anymore. A few bearer bonds that expired in the 80s. She let that fall like a clean plate. He liked to romanticize paper. Paper has a career beyond romance, Wolfe said. It can be forged, redated, reassigned. Mr. Ward, may I assume that your partnership agreement with Mr. Lawson permitted transfer of shares by counter-signature if certain debts were cleared? Ward licked his lip. Yes, he said. If one partner satisfied specific obligations, the other could transfer a portion to effect a rebalancing. And, Wolfe pursued, if one partner were suddenly unable to sign, that would prevent any transfer, unless there were an earlier instrument, yes? It would freeze the balance until probate, Ward acknowledged, and his fingers tightened on the chair. Mr. Wolfe, if you're implying— I am not implying, Wolfe said. I am asking you to think aloud. I will do the implying. The cigar grated in the pause. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. Mr. Lawford, you employ a man named Harrow to lurk. He has admitted as much to Mr. Panzer, who is not always as gentle as his name. You instructed Harrow to watch Mr. Ward and discourage improvisation until a signature landed on a transfer. This was your word on the telephone. True. Kramer's head snapped an inch. His eyes went to Lawford, who closed a door behind his face. I instruct men to hold positions, he said. If your operative invaded my conversations, that is his misdemeanor. Spare me commissions of piety, Wolfe said with the first edge of the day. You engineer conditions. A bottle with no label is a condition. It excites fear. It manufactures confusion. It produces delay. While men are puzzled, you move paper. You hope to produce either a consensual transfer under pressure or a situation in which Mr. Lawson's capacity to sign became a matter for lawyers rather than partners. Meanwhile, you performed tricks. A twin bottle to excite rumor, a counterfeit label to titillate my pantry, a card to annoy Ms. Rojas. You were counting minutes, Mr. Lawford. That is your profession. Lawford smiled with the top half of his face. And yours is rhetoric. Mine is deduction, Wolfe said. Here is a deduction you will dislike. You had access to Mr. Lawson's desk. You visited the warehouse after hours more than once. Mr. Dugan placed you there last night. He is too resentful to lie for you. You could introduce a bottle to a desk and remove one from a crate and make sure there were 2 stories for the same fact. You could also choose a compound that would not announce itself in a blunt lab run, something that might be present in adulterated wine, which New York has seen before, and claim accident later. Rojas sat forward a fraction. Ethylene glycol, she said. It ruined a region once. Possibly, Wolfe said. I prefer not to guess chemistry. Dr. Vollmer will greet the true answer when it arrives and shake its hand. But the psychology is correct. A man like Mr. Lawford hopes to create ambiguity, not acts of apocalypse. A death that looks accidental, a message that looks theatrical. Meanwhile, papers move. Kramer blew smoke sideways. You're circling a point, Wolfe. Land. I will when it suits me, Wolfe said evenly. First, the key. Mr. Karp, did anyone besides the narrow-faced clerk in the spring repair last year present you a cylinder of our type? Karp looked at his ledger, turned a page, and shook his head. Number. But someone else did. Something cheap. 3 days ago, a man purchased a set of blank keys and a file. Wolfe's eyes went to me. Archie. I'll chase the receipt after, I said. For now, we'll assume our friend likes to make his own permissions. Good, Wolfe said. He lifted a finger a quarter-inch and lowered it. Mr. Ward, you have been shepherded by Miss Denton into Mr. Lawford's pen. I do not say you knew what else grazed there, but when you went through your side door this morning, what did you carry in? Ward had his eyes on the floor like answers might grow there in time. He pulled his gaze up. Invoices, he said, and a draft of a transfer. I didn't sign anything, I didn't. Denton's head turned very slightly, as if a sound outside had become interesting. Lawford's eyes, which had been careful not to dance, missed a step. Kramer's cigar did a small volcano imitation. Ah, Wolfe said gently, like a man who has been handed the spoon he wanted. A draft prepared in case panic could be turned into prudence. Prepared by whom? By my associate, Denton said, and let her chin move toward Lawford as little as physics allowed. Of course, Wolfe said. Inspector, do you observe how men who disdain labels like to brand their tools associate? The word is useful. It bears anything you pack into it. Mr. Lawford, you will soon be invited to produce drafts, envelopes, and calendars. He turned his head to Agnes. Mrs. Lawson, did your brother hint he was going to rebalance the partnership, either to increase his share by audacity or to shed it for cash? He didn't hint, she said. He boasted. And then he worried out loud. He told me Henry would never forgive him for signing the paper he had in mind. She drew a breath, steady. I told him to do the math with a professional. Which he did, Wolfe said almost kindly, and let the slice show. But not the sort that keeps books. The sort that keeps conditions. He tilted his face to the ceiling for a second, as if considering consulting the plaster for an opinion, and returned to the room. Inspector, you possess the man who moves labels. Hold him. I'm not yet naming the mind behind him. He lifted a hand before Kramer could snarl. Not yet. Because I want one last demonstration. I knew that tone, and I knew the trick it introduced. Wolfe doesn't do conjuring. He does geometry with humans. He nodded at Fritz, who had been waiting like a well-trained symbolist, and Fritz brought in a tray with 8 identical black cloth bags, each concealing a bottle's shoulder and shape. He set them on the side table as if they were grenades set to polite. Wolfe addressed the room. Mr. Lawson loved blind tastings, he said. He believed removing the label revealed essence. Our pedagogue has been trading on that fondness. I propose a useful inverse. 8 bottles, 8 bags, 8 labels in my pocket. He tapped his vest. Vest. Only one of these is the imposter from my pantry. I invite each of you in turn to step to the table and take the bottle that belongs to you. No one moved for a second because the proposition wasn't the kind rooms like. Denton lifted an eyebrow. Belongs. By habit, Wolfe said. By guilt, by reflex. Mr. Dugan will reach for the one with weight because he carries. Mr. Nye for the neat seam because he files. Ms. Rojas for the exact fill because she knows fill heights. Mr. Ward for the one closest to the edge because he likes to avoid distance. Miss Denton for the one nearest to an exit. He paused. And the man who has been in my pantry will choose the one whose nick he knows by touch. Kramer let out a sound between a laugh and a warning. This is a parlor game. This is identification, Wolfe said. Not of a bottle, of a habit he gestured. Mr. Dugan. Dugan stood, went to the table like it owed him money, and put a palm on the bag with the lower center of gravity. He glanced at Wolfe. Wolfe nodded, and Dugan returned to his chair, with the slightest relief a man ever permitted himself. Nye followed, hovering, and inevitably touched the one with the seam lined perfect to the bag. He recoiled as if he had betrayed a secret and clung to it anyway. Rojas's fingers, quick and exact, hovered and landed on the one filled to a hair beneath the shouldered line where bottled professionals prefer it. She tipped her head like a salute to competence and sat. Ward, with a faint tremor, reached for the near corner bottle before he remembered he was being watched, then changed to the next. Wolfe's lids lowered as if he had seen the first reach, not the second. Denton glided, fingers skimming, then took the bottle nearest the path to the door and smiled at me just enough to admit she had heard the prompt and chosen whether to obey it. That left two. Carp went last, but one, nabbing the one with a burr in the glass I hadn't even noticed and grunting at the insult to manufacturing. There was one bag left on the table and two men left who hadn't moved, Kramer, who wasn't playing, and Lawford, who had kept his hands on his knees like school. "Mr. Lawford," Wolfe said softly. Lawford stood, calm, and went to the table. His right hand, the one that wore the bracelet to Pearlie's satisfaction, stayed still. He used his left. He hovered, not at all. He picked up the remaining bagged bottle with perfect neutrality and turned it slightly, almost idly, as if he were considering the concept of circles. Then his thumb stroked the cloth of the capsule line where a nick, small and particular, would be. He put the bottle down and looked at Wolfe with a decent attempt at boredom. "Thank you," Wolfe said, and the chair creaked under him as if it had breathed. "Inspector, we're nearly ready." Kramer's eyes were not bored. "Name," he said. "Soon," Wolfe said, and let the room's tension hold its shape like a flawless meringue for 1 second more. He turned to me. "Archie, fetch the envelope of wax from Doctor, Volmer's swab, the card from Ms. Rojas's crate, and the draft of the transfer Mr. Ward nearly permitted himself. Bring them with Mr. Panzer and tell him to bring Harrow. Our pedagogue has enjoyed anonymity." He angled his head at Lawford. "We will give him a label." Saul made it fast. By the time I got the envelope of wax, the card from Rojas's crate, and Ward's unsigned draft stacked like a sampler on Wolfe's blotter, the front door announced visitors without needing a bell. I opened to find Saul in his conservative suit and Harrow beside him, cuffless but not invited to put his hands in his pockets. Up close, the limp was the kind you learn to live around. The face was the kind that tried not to be remembered and failed because it worked too hard at it. Kramer pushed up from his chair like sunrise on a bad day. "You," he said to Harrow, with the tone of a man recognizing his least favorite cologne. "Park it." Harrow parked. Saul nodded once to Wolfe and slid to a stretch of wall that had never betrayed him. Wolfe didn't look at Harrow first. He looked at the paper. He held up Volmer's wax envelope like a teacher with a vocabulary card, then the Ask Wolfe note, then the draft transfer with its tidy blanks. He set all three down in a neat row and spoke without raising his voice. "These three are our grammar," he said, "a flake of sealing wax that does not match Fritz's pantry, a card that presumes anonymity is witty, a draft that requires only a frightened hand. They are not lethal in themselves. They are tools. I dislike tools used to humiliate minds." He turned to Harrow. "Mr. Harrow, you were told to watch my house. You were also told to enter my house. You did so twice." Harrow looked at his shoes like they'd offer counsel. "Private property," he said, slow. "You need an order to make me make noise." "You need sense to withhold it," Kramer said, coming forward with the kind of patience that gets results and confessions. "Talk." Harrow's eyes flicked to Saul, and I didn't envy the memory that produced. He swallowed. "I was hired by Mr. Lawford," he said, "to keep a client calm, to keep a situation from unraveling." "Define situation," Wolfe said. "Noise," Harrow said. Police at a warehouse, a partner looking for a pen at a bad time, a bottle that might be a joke. Which bottle did you handle? Wolfe asked, silk over steel. The kitchen one, Harrow said, with the cautious pride of a man reciting a fact he can survive. I took a label off one of yours. Later, I set a wrong one back. I didn't touch the wine. Who told you to undress our bottle? Wolfe asked. Harrow angled his head. The job came from Lawford. And before Mr. Lawford. Wolfe's eyes didn't change. Harrow hesitated, found out the room didn't blink, and took the step. His client. Name, Kramer said. Harrow's jaw worked like a man opening a stuck window. He looked at Lawford. Lawford didn't look back at him. He looked at me as if I were a mirror he preferred not to use. Harrow dragged up a syllable. Ward. Ward made a sound that wasn't a word and wasn't a cough. His hand went to his tie and missed it the first try. Mr. Ward, Wolfe said in a tone he keeps for knives and errors. Did you, through Miss Denton and Mr. Lawford, pay Mr. Harrow to watch your own warehouse and to watch my house, and to remove and reapply labels to create distraction while you considered your position? Denton's head turned toward Ward by a measure that registered as mathematics, not sympathy. Ward stared past us all as if an honest answer might be written on the far wall in lemon juice. He picked the tie at last and got it straight without making it look better. I hired Miss Denton to help. She engaged Mr. Lawford. I don't know what Mr. Lawford did or didn't do. Mr. Lawford, Wolfe said, and laid one palm flat. You will tell Inspector Kramer whether Mr. Ward's retainer went to you expressly and whether you subcontracted Mr. Harrow's services to do precisely what he describes. Lawford's face didn't fold. It adjusted. I am an umbrella, he said. Clients stand under me and stay dry. Mr. Ward retained me to keep the elements from moving papers that did not belong to the elements. Translate, Kramer snapped. Lawford obliged because he likes sounding helpful when the terms are his. I advised that, with Mr. Lawson dead, any precipitate disclosures could freeze their operations and invite predatory action. I counseled calm. I placed Mr. Harrow to prevent rash acts and to watch for intrusions. I did not poison anyone. No one said you did, Wolfe said, as mild as a whetstone. You are not built for poison. You are built for arrangements. You arranged a twin bottle to advertise ambiguity. You arranged a wrong label to taunt me. You arranged a watch on Mr. Ward. You arranged, perhaps with assistance, a night visit to Mr. Lawson's desk. Lawford's eyes touched Dugan as if attendance sheets might exonerate him. I had authority to check security, he said. If your foreman objects to my competence, I forgive him. Dugan's hands flattened on his knees. Come do it again without my say-so, he suggested, friendly as a loading hook. Wolfe lifted 2 fingers and let them fall. Silence smoothed. He looked at Agnes Lawson. Mrs. Lawson, your brother told you he planned an act Mr. Ward would never forgive. The act was to sign a transfer, not to Ward, but away from him, perhaps to a creditor who would exchange relief for equity. Mr. Ward would have been left with less control. Agnes didn't make it a question. Yes, she said. Leonard was a fool about many things. He was not a fool about that. He thought he could pull off a miracle and keep his pride. He was wrong. Rojas sat with her hands easy and her eyes active. And if he had signed that transfer, it would have been recorded yesterday morning, she put in. Timing is a currency in my world, Mr. Wolfe. I see why Mr. Ward hired a man to sell him a different clock. Ward's head jerked. I did not. I hired no one to harm Leonard. Harm is elastic, Wolfe said. You hired a method to delay and confusion. Under delay, signatures fail to appear. Under confusion, men become persuadable. Persuadable to sign to you instead, I said, because I can do arithmetic even when the numbers are people. Or persuadable to sign nothing at all and let the present balance remain. Ward looked down at his hands as if they were new to him. "I wanted time," he said quietly. "Time is not a crime." "No," Wolfe allowed. "But what was done with it may be. Men who sell time at a premium too often sweeten the deal by sowing accidents. Mr. Lawford, did you introduce any liquid to any bottle?" "No," Lawford said with genuine contempt for the thought. "I don't touch the substance. I move the container." "That," Wolfe said, "is your epitaph." Kramer had the dead cigar pointing again. "Wolfe, your man only gets a cell for trespass and circus unless we connect him to the death. I don't mind booking him on art and burglary, but I like murder when murder's on the table." "Then we will supply you a pathway," Wolfe said. He didn't look at Vollmer's envelope. He looked at Rojas. "Ms. Rojas, when you said ethylene glycol earlier, you did not toss the term like a layman. You know its taste, its history, its signature." "I know what ruined a market and a reputation," she said levelly. "Years ago, a line of wine was sweetened with glycol. Men died. The bottles lied." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "Dr. Vollmer will tell you, when his report is an instrument rather than a sketch, whether Mr. Lawson's sample held a glycol. If it did, it might have reached him in a bottle that had been adulterated before it reached this city. That gives our pedagogue plausible deniability. He did not introduce the poison. He introduced the bottle. We will find, Inspector, that our man acquired, by purchase or theft, a single bottle from a tainted batch to use as a prod. He knew Lawson's pride would make him drink." Kramer's mouth twitched around possibilities. "Who had the network to find such a one-off?" "Mr. Lawford," Wolfe said, "or anyone who hired him. He traffics in exceptions, but he is not the mind behind the choice. He is a tool. We are not done with the mind." Denton's chin lifted a whisper. "If you are about to indict Mr. Ward for planning his partner's death," she said, smooth and straight, "you will be wrong. He couldn't plan his way out of a coat closet with the door open." "That is unfair," Ward said, small and wounded. "That is accurate," Wolfe said. "Mr. Ward did not devise this. He desired it. He paid for it. He yielded to it. But he did not design it." Rojas went still in a manner that would have rung a bell in a quieter room. "Then who," she said, "sold him the design?" Wolfe let his gaze go to the least obvious corner and arrive at the most. He looked at Nye. Peter Nye had spent the afternoon making himself 2 sizes smaller than his suit. Now he looked up like a man called by a role he hadn't signed to be on. "Me," he whispered, and it wasn't feigned. "You," Wolfe said, "not accusation, observation. Not for murder, for mathematics. You predicted the panic. You logged what your employer told you not to log. You went to a locksmith because you wanted to control the door your employer was about to open to manipulation. You are the only man in this room who both understood the ledgers and feared what would happen if they were used as levers. You did not hire Mr. Lawford. You are not that sort. But you told someone that Mr. Lawson meant to sign away control." Nye's face went white, then pink, as the shame found its way through. He swallowed and looked at Miss Denton. "I met her once, to pay a courier fee for Mr. Ward. She told me that if Mr. Ward needed solutions, she knew a man. I only said the situation was volatile." "Names," Kramer said. "She gave me none," Nye said, wretched. "I gave her none. I said Mr. Lawson intended to sign a transfer the next week. I said Mr. Ward would be ruined. I said someone would do something unwise. She said—" He stopped himself too late. "She said," Wolfe supplied, "that unwise things can be made wise with the right supervision." He turned his head that 1/5 of an inch to Denton. Denton held his gaze and let the truth in with the grace of a hostess, admitting a guest she doesn't like, but invited. "I broker solutions," she said. Mr. Ward panicked. Mr. Nye whimpered. Mr. Lawson bragged to the wrong heirs. I connected a man who could hold back a tide. If the tide knocked someone down, that was the ocean, Not me. You are a poet of disclaimers, Wolfe said, and I envied the words only a little. But the ocean does not choose which beach to batter. You did. You and Mr. Lawford selected a method that celebrated Mr. Lawson's vanity, an unlabeled bottle, and a rhythm that exploited the lab's caution. You selected my house because I would be unable to refuse the invitation to be disturbed, and the disturbance would occupy the only man likely to compress this fiasco quickly. He inclined his head a fraction. I do not flatter myself. I define my occupation. You used me as ballast while you moved paper. Denton didn't look away. And did it work? She asked, a drop of sweet on the edge of the glass. No, Wolfe said, because someone took off a label in my pantry without respecting the room that held it. Kramer slapped the dead cigar down on the edge of my ashtray and made it jump. We can debate metaphors later, he said. I'm booking Lawford on burglary, trespass, obstruction, tampering, and anything else I can spell without a dictionary. I'm holding Denton as accessory to every one of those, and for conspiracy, if Volmer hands me glycols. Ward. His look went to the man like a cold shower. Don't leave. If Wolfe gives me your name with italics, I'll want you where I can find you. Ward nodded, small and fast. I won't. Wolfe did something he rarely does. He leaned forward a hair. We are not done, he said softly. I have not given you the mind. Kramer's eyes narrowed. If it isn't Lawford and it isn't Ward, it is the person who knew where to place the insult so it cut deepest, Wolfe said. The person who wrote, "You overpay for labels," because the line would irritate only one particular reader, enough to ensure the police would be invited to watch an irrelevant bottle while a relevant signature expired. He turned. Ms. Rojas. Her brows went up without indignation, and that's how I knew Wolfe was sharpening the knife for later, not cutting now. She tilted her head. I have enemies with better taste in insults, she said. If I'd written the card, I'd have spelled overpay with numbers. Indeed, Wolfe said, which is why you did not write it. The mind that wrote it admires its own wit more than its effectiveness. His eyes slid at last to Agnes Lawson. Agnes met them without a flinch. I don't write jokes, she said, and if I meant to save my brother from folly, I would have hidden his pen, not killed him. I know, Wolfe said. You are not the mind. The room breathed again, but not easily. Wolfe sat back, and the chair exhaled with him. He let the silence be a canvas and put one last brush-stroke on it. Inspector, he said, take Mr. Lawford and Mr. Harrow. Hold Miss Denton. Do not yet arrest Mr. Ward. Indulge me 2 hours. At 5 o'clock we will reconvene. By then I will have the final instrument. The record that shows who first suggested the bottle should be opened at Ward and Lawson yesterday morning at 10. The suggestion is the crime. The bottle is only the stage property. Kramer didn't love being handed a clock, but he recognized craftsmanship when it whistled. 5, he said. He jerked his head at Pearlie. Bag 'em. Lawford rose with the dignity of a man who has rehearsed arrests and insisted on correct nouns. Harrow stood like a man who's been carried before. Denton smoothed her skirt and kept her eyes steady, not because she was serene, but because the angle earned points. When the door closed on the civic procession, the room sagged an inch and came back. Rojas crossed her legs, and the map in the globe looked like it wanted to spin. Nye looked like he wanted to fold. Ward looked like a man who'd been told the gallows was booked up and he had until morning. I went to the window and checked the street out of habit. Saul was already a shadow. Wolfe glanced at the clock and then at me. Archie, he said, fetch me Mr. Lawson's tasting calendar from the warehouse. If it has been misplaced, find it. Ask Dugan who suggested 10 o'clock. Do not accept his first answer. Then visit LaSalle. Ask the sommelier whether Mr. Lawson telephoned Monday to boast he would settle a doubt at 10 on Wednesday. Bring me the words, not the sentiment. And if the calendar refuses to be found, I asked, Then we will have our mind, he said. Men who admire their own tidiness cannot resist recording their cleverness. I want the line where he wrote down his little triumph. He closed his eyes once, as if to sign the order. When you have it, we will label him. I got my hat. The brownstone felt narrower on the way out because the case had widened, and when that happens, walls pull closer to help you think. On the stoop, the afternoon slanted, and the city kept being the city. I lit the engine, pointed it downtown, and told myself that somewhere in a ledger, a man had written the hour he thought he would win. All I had to do was read it before 5. Dugan met me at the warehouse, with a face like a door that had decided to be harder to open. He didn't invite me in. I walked by him anyway and let the smell of cork and dust do the welcoming. Up the stairs, the tape still banded Lawson's office. I looked at it, looked at Dugan, and waited. He gave the sigh of a man who doesn't believe in rules when they become inconvenient, peeled back a corner as if the adhesive had offended him, and I slid in sideways, careful not to nudge a molecule I didn't have to. You learn to see a desk the way Wolfe sees a sentence. What's there? What should be there? What's pretending? Lawson's had scattered letters, a ledger, the empty tumbler Kramer's boys had filed in their minds, and a big leather blotter that had decided to keep secrets only until somebody asked nicely. I asked. The lower right edge lifted with that soft heel-tack sound you get from old glue and impatience. Underneath, Lawson had parked the thing I'd come for, a thin, black, spiral-bound tasting calendar with a gold stamp on the cover. The kind restaurants give to favorite performers and egos give to themselves. I opened it to this week. Monday was a hedgerow of scribbles. La Salle 8, Marquet Call, Rojas, no. Tuesday had a wine merchant's shopping list. Wednesday had fewer words and better penmanship. At 10 a.m. in Lawson's hand was blind, settled doubt, no label, per MT. The per MT had the flourish of a man writing down a detail he liked the sound of, not a fact he feared. Underneath, a second line, call Denton after, confirm papers. No, flourish there. Just the flat postscript of a man who needed permission to continue his own life. I took a breath and let it out slow. Dugan had stayed in the doorway with a square jaw and a distrust of my species. I held up the calendar and tapped the line with my pencil. Who's MT? I asked. Man you had a chat with at the bar the other day, Dugan said, surprising me and not. Trell. He came around Monday afternoon to crow at Leonard about something he'd settle. I don't make lists of other men's crows. He was in here 10 minutes and left smelling like lemons and having said the word blind too often. Did he touch anything? He touched the air, Dugan said. Men like that leave fingerprints on the mood instead of on the wood. Who told Lawson 10 was a good time? Dugan's eyes did a slow lap and came back. Trell. He said he'd be at La Salle at 11 to toast a correction if Leonard wanted to eat his words on a schedule. Anyone else hear it? Nye was on the stairs. His ears are big when trouble walks. Dugan's mouth flattened. And I don't take instruction from Trell if that's what you're fishing. I don't set a man's glass. I flipped the page and took a photo in my head. There's no camera, as convenient as a skull, when the skull has Wolfe's voice in it, telling you to remember the exact shape of a flourish. I put the calendar back where Lawson had kept it, pressed the blotter corner down so it looked like a man who had never lifted anything, and stepped around the desk's aura. On the way out, I stopped on the landing and waited for Nye. He was there, whether because he had heard my foot or because guilt keeps its appointments. He looked worse than earlier, stretched thinner, like elastic that had been asked to hold too much. Monday, I said. You heard Trell tell Lawson to open at 10. Nye's eyes flickered in the direction of a truth and then tried to roll down the shade. He said it was the civilized hour, he murmured. He laughed. Mr. Lawson liked to be told where the stage would be. He wrote it down. I thought it was... He didn't finish. You thought it was an act with props, I said. And you were right. Stay available. If you leave your desk again without telling me or the inspector, I'll assume you went to buy more screws for a lock you can't keep shut. I let him go back to his numbers and the mercy they can't offer. LaSalle had the soft, light and quiet hum of money that likes to know it's being spent on something that can be described in adjectives. The maitre d' recognized my face as the kind of face that doesn't order lunch at 2:30 and likes straight answers better than amuse-bouche. He led me to the corner where the sommelier stood consulting a pair of glasses with the seriousness of a man doing chemistry, which, in his way, he was. "Mr. Trell is not in," the sommelier said, polite as linen. "He likes to not be in after he has made an appearance." "I don't want Mr. Trell," I said. "I want to know if Mr. Lawson called you Monday to announce a performance and if Mr. Trell boasted about it, and if anyone used the phrase, 'toast a correction.'" He smiled. "Not humor, recognition." "Mr. Trell has a repertory," he said. "He used those words, yes. On the telephone to me, and later to a table he wanted to admire him. Mr. Lawson called Monday to ask if I had a table today at 11 if a man needed to eat something humble. I said we had plenty of tables and humility depended on guests. I regret he didn't keep his appointment." "Did Trell eat here at 11? I asked. "He arrived," the sommelier said. "He ordered a glass and waited 12 minutes. Then he made a face a man makes when the mirror doesn't give him the line he rehearsed. He paid and left without finishing." He paused, then added, "Mr. Trell also made a remark to my junior. Some men can't read without labels," he said. "Some men can't live without them. It is the sort of thing critics say when they want to hear themselves." "Did he mention Miss Denton?" "Who?" "No," he said, and meant it. I left a tip that wasn't extravagant but that remembered the tone and took the day in a straight line back to 35th. On the way, the city did its city thing, narrowed when I needed it to widen, bristled when I needed it to soothe. It had not been built for men with clocks in their heads set to 5 o'clock theater. Wolfe heard me come in the way a house hears a foot it knows. He was at his desk with the posture of a man reserving energy for the next sentence that would cost him something. Fritz had the room organized for a recital and his apron organized for war. Kramer had not yet planted. The cigar would come with him. Rojas and Agnes and the others weren't in the chairs. The space was holding. I put the report in Wolfe's lap without putting it on a paper. I gave him the blotter, the calendar, the line with MT, the afterthought to call Denton. I gave him Dugan's cautious cooperation and Nye's rectangular honesty. I gave him LaSalle's phrases and the little mercy of Trell's unfinished glass. When I was done, he made one sound that could have been relief, contempt, or appetite. "Good," he said. "So we are rid of 2 ghosts and left with 1 human." Mr. Trell suggested the hour and the manner. He wrote the insult for himself without needing a card. He wanted his life to supply an audience at 11. He did not need to write to Ms. Rojas. Mr. Lawford or his messenger did that for their own production, but the mind that patted the case into shape, that selected a bottle like a riddle and an hour like a drum roll, was Mr. Trell's. He lifted his hand an inch, then let it drop. He could not introduce poison. He could introduce pride. And after pride had done the heavy lifting, I said, "Lawford handled props." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "And Miss Denton sold the stage to a man who wanted time." He pinched his lower lip, a habit that has nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with punctuation. "Call Inspector Kramer. Invite him with the punctual discourtesy he prefers. Call Ms. Rojas and Mrs. Lawson and Mr. Cobb. I have uses for them yet. Mr. Ward is to sit and not faint. Miss Denton is to be present and practice silence. And ask Dr. Vollmer to indulge a prediction that his instrument will say either glycol or adulterant consistent with glycol. He will tell me I'm not a chemist. I will tell him he is correct. Then he will come anyway." I made the calls. Kramer gave me a noise that would have made a string quartet pack up their bows and go home, which meant he was on his way. Rojas said, 3 o'clock was too early for entertainment. 5 will be better, and hung up. Agnes said, I have dinner at 7. I assume you will be done by then, which is the kind of calm that does something to a room when it arrives. Karp said little and would show with his little book like a psalter. Vollmer gave me the predicted rebuke and the predicted concession. By 4:30, the brownstone held its breath. Wolfe doesn't tap his fingers. He taps his patience. He sat with his eyes half closed as if he were smelling the last sentence before it was cooked. I checked the pantry latch and the back gate in the alley, found nothing with a limp or conscience, and came back to the office. Fritz had placed the 8 black bags back on the side table, empty now, props retired, lesson learned. He had also placed a tray with water and, for Kramer's sins, an ashtray that could forgive even his brand. They filed in, Kramer with the live cigar, Pearlie behind him with a face that could hold a door shut by looking at it. Rojas still trimmed to the point. Agnes without the handbag this time, which meant she had decided the room wouldn't steal from her. Karp with his ledger, Ward creased but upright, Nye grey at the edges, Denton smooth, and last, escorted and neutral, Mr. Trell. He had not been invited by me, which meant he had been found by someone with a badge and a memory. Kramer caught my look. He was at La Salle, not eating his pride, he said. Your calendar trick sent me the bill. I thought I'd collect. Wolfe didn't stand. He never does. But he inclined the mass enough to count his greeting and let his eyes count his cast. He looked at Trell last and longest, the way you look at a man who is not surprised to be looked at and is therefore surprised to be seen. Mr. Trell, he said, you enjoy words. You use them as other men use knives. Well, and sometimes where a spoon would do. On Monday you told Mr. Lawson to open an unlabeled bottle at 10 today and to join you at 11 to toast a correction. He died before the toast. I imagine your appetites were frustrated. He let that sit until Trell's mouth twitched. What do you suppose I did, Mr. Wolfe? Trell asked, dry as a cork. Wrote cyanide into a sonnet? No, Wolfe said. You wrote pride into a schedule, and you wrote a jeer into a card someone else delivered. You have written the same jeer in your reviews often enough that Ms. Rojas could recite it from memory. You overpay for labels. It is your line, not your handwriting. Your pleasure is to remove what you believe is false and display what you decide is true. In that you share a vice with murderers. They also prefer to correct mistakes by eliminating them. Trell's eyes were steady. If you intend to put me in a cell for rhetoric, he said, you will have company. I intend, Wolfe said, to place responsibility where it belongs. You are not responsible for poison. You are responsible for incitement, for the hour, for the method that made poison possible without the embarrassment of a label. You're also responsible for encouraging a man like Mr. Lawford to feel he had an audience. I've never met Mr. Lawford, Trell said. You have now, Kramer said, and the cigar pointed at the door where Pearlie's men had stationed a chair with metal in it. And you're going to like him, because you'll see him often if any of Wolfe's flourishes land with Vollmer's instrument. Wolfe's brows crept a fraction. Dr. Vollmer. Vollmer, on cue and on schedule, filled the door with a bag and the guiltless expression of a physician who has brought news and no appetite for its reception. He came in, set the bag on Fritz's clean table, and folded his hands. Preliminary confirmatory, he said. Not a verdict, but strong enough to risk a sentence or two. Traces of ethylene glycol consistent with adulterated wine. Not enough to guarantee death by itself in a sip, but enough, combined with an empty stomach and hubris, to collapse a heart with enthusiasm. Kramer grunted approval like a man being handed an extra hammer. Trell didn't move. Lawford, in absentia, had my sympathy for once. It isn't pleasant to be proven a man who chose his devil for his convenience and found the devil had done other work before he arrived. Wolfe didn't smile. He doesn't in victory. He decompresses. He took a breath, filled his chest with air that had been forced to listen to too many people for too long, and let it out slowly. Then he spoke, and the room leaned in because it always does when he is finally prepared to be finished. "Inspector," he said, calm and heavy as dinner, "you have your charge sheet: trespass, tampering, conspiracy to obstruct, accessory to manslaughter if your district attorney is clever, and the calendar entry reads as cleanly to a jury as it does to me. You have the hand that arranged the stage, Mr. Lawford, and the hand that peddled it, Miss Denton, and the hand that suggested the performance, Mr. Trell. You sound our reply. We'll choose whether to include Mr. Ward on the line for hiring the wrong umbrella, or whether you will permit him to discover what it costs to be afraid in public. As for the bottle," he glanced at the tray where Fritz had set the imposter, the wrong label staring back at us like a smirk. "This house will welcome its absence." Kramer nodded once. He didn't say, "Thank you." He doesn't when he's about to work. He turned on his heel and began to allocate men and minutes with the economy he saves for days when Wolfe has burned the fat for him. Wolfe turned his head the small amount it takes to bring his eyes to me and nobody else. "Archie," he said, "when our guests are gone, remind me to speak to Fritz about the butcher. I will not have veal overcharged and wine underlabeled in the same week." "Civilization," I said, "has to start somewhere." "It starts at dinner," he said. "It sometimes survives until breakfast." He shut his eyes for one beat. I watched the room empty itself of trouble, one pair of shoes at a time, and heard in my head the last line he hadn't yet given me. He would say it after the plates, when the house had forgiven us, when Fritz had forgiven the pantry, when the orchids upstairs had accepted that men can't help making noise. I could feel the quiet preparing to receive it. I'll bring your Nero Wolfe mystery to a close. Here is the final section, conclusion, of Nero Wolfe and the Wine Bottle with No Label, a Nero Wolfe story. The silence after Wolfe finished was thicker than the dust on a 10-year-old case file. Henry Ward's face had drained of color, and Julia sat rigid, hands clamped together like she was holding on for dear life. Crowther looked ready to explode, but even he sensed the weight of Wolfe's words and stayed planted, knuckles white on the arms of his chair. Wolfe didn't move. He let the silence stretch, the way only he could, using it like a weapon sharper than any knife. Finally, Ward swallowed hard and said, "You're wrong. That's insane. Why would I kill my own partner?" Wolfe closed his eyes, leaned back, and rested both hands on his middle. For control. Lawson was going to expose the arrangement you struck with Mr. Crowther, wasn't he? Smuggling rare wines, relabeling them, cutting costs while pocketing the difference. He planned to end the deception, which would also end your fortune. So, you contrived a clever execution disguised as an enigma. You presented the bottle without origin, knowing his pride would not allow him to resist tasting it. Poison is efficient, a label missing, a jest that becomes a death sentence. Ward half rose, sputtering, but I was already on my feet and pressing him back with a hand on his shoulder. "Sit down, pal. You're not walking out of here with a shrug." Crowther muttered a curse under his breath. Julia whispered, "My God." And it wasn't clear whether she meant it for Ward or Wolfe. Ward tried again. "There's no proof. This is conjecture." Wolfe opened his eyes and looked at him as though he were a bothersome insect crawling on the edge of his desk. On the contrary. The poison was not subtle. Mr. Goodwin retrieved a sample and had it analyzed as directed. Traces of cyanide masked with bittering agents. The wax seal bore your firm's distinct imprint, faint but unmistakable. A clever man might argue it was planted. Unfortunately for you, Mr. Ward, cleverness runs out when the pattern is too precise. You made the mistake of bringing the bottle here yourself, thinking to control the narrative. Saul Panzer, who had been leaning in the corner unnoticed, spoke up in his calm, even tone. "Police will corroborate the rest, Mr. Ward. I traced your errand boy who delivered it. He'll talk." That was the breaking point. Ward sagged back into the chair, every ounce of bluster gone. He muttered something about Lawson never understanding, about the business being his, about survival. Wolfe cut him off with a single word. Pooh. I made the call to Inspector Kramer. He arrived with his usual red face and suspicion, but after Saul's report, my notes and Wolfe's statement, even he had to concede. Ward went out the door in Kramer's custody, shoulders slumped, the fight drained out of him. Crowther stormed off without a farewell. Julia lingered for a moment, looked at Wolfe as if trying to read a code he would never reveal, and then slipped out quietly. When the door finally closed and the brownstone was once again our own, I exhaled. Neat as ever, boss. You might even say vintage. Wolfe grunted, not flattered. I might say, he rumbled, that human greed, when decanted, is always the same. Labels are irrelevant. What rests in the bottle is the truth, however unpalatable. That was his cue to signal Fritz for beer. I jotted my notes, already imagining how Kramer would try to spin the credit. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, peace had returned to the brownstone. And as always, Wolfe had uncorked the mystery, poured it out, and left not a drop undrunk. 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 Drop undrunk.